Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Sterling Heights City Council to order. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Remain standing for the invocation. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Ms. Riska, can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor,
Here.
Zarowski,
Here.
Roski,
Present.
Iraqi,
Present.
Present.
Mr. Yanis,
Here.
and Mayor Garrett.
Present.
Thank you, Council. We need approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This is the first of two special city council meetings to discuss the upcoming budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. As always, we have a workshop discussion, and so I will turn it over to our city manager, who will MC from there. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and believe it or not, I'm very excited to present the budget this evening, at least kick it off on behalf of our directors and many of our managers who are present this evening, and certainly our finance team. We're excited to present the fiscal year 2024 budget. The budget continues to focus on infrastructure improvements with another really busy year for road projects, which are starting up already. We have a significant sidewalk gap program that's coming. We have significant public safety expenditures and personnel and equipment, and we're continuing to build on the city's very solid financial position. The budget, as you know, incorporates feedback received from the City Council, not only throughout the year in various meetings, including City Council meetings, but also our strategic planning session that's held every January. And like past years, we have a number of presentations this evening. And if the council does desire any budget amendments, once again, we encourage you to suggest any tonight so that we can get well prepared for the amendments to be voted on at your second budget hearing, which is April 25th. So there will be plenty of time, obviously, for questions from audience members and also the city council. And as we customarily do, we start out with our budget and finance director, Jennifer Varney, presenting an overview of the budget, and then we'll delve into some of the more detailed presentations. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Ms. Varney to kick it off. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Ms. Varney.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Koszubski, and members of council. I'm happy to be here tonight to present the fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget. The total fund city budget is $238.4 million, which can be broken down into the 5 major fund types as depicted here. The largest city fund, the general fund, totals $125.4 million, or 53% of the total fund budget. Followed by the water and sewer fund at $60.7 million, which is 26% of the total budget. Special revenues, capital projects, and debt service funds make up the remainder. The total budget for the current fiscal year is $273 million, and the proposed total fund budget again for next year is $238.4, for a decrease of 12.7% or $34.6 million. The major fund changes are broken down on this slide. The road bond construction fund is down $20.8 million due to funds budgeted for Mound Road in the current fiscal year. Excuse me. Our share of the $230 million project totals $36.1 million. About $11.7 million had been spent prior to fiscal year 2022, and $22.6 million is budgeted in the current fiscal year. The proposed budget includes only the final $1.8 million of the total project cost. 2 bonds were issued to finance this project, but no additional bonding is necessary. The major roads fund is down 8.3 million due to the timing of road projects. The current year amended budget of 13.8 million includes 6.7 million of projects carried forward from fiscal year 2022. There are 4.9 million of new projects included in the proposed budget. The capital projects fund is down 6.1 million. This is primarily due to the carry forward of 5.8 million of unfinished projects from 2022 in the current year, including sidewalk gap and repair programs, the final cost of the DPW building, Delia Park parking lot repair, and grant-funded fire equipment. The American Rescue Plan Act fund is down 5.3 million due to the funding of Plumbrook and Ryan roads in the current fiscal year. There are no large projects included in the proposed budget, as most are still in the planning stages. Projects to come to fruition during the budget year will be brought to council for approval, and the budget will be amended at that time. The CDBG fund is down 1.3 million, and this is due to one-time CARES Act funding that was included in the current fiscal year, and also includes the carry forward of 2 road projects that were originally budgeted in fiscal year 2022. The voted debt fund is down 600,000, and the good news here is the only debt service in this fund was for the voted improvements for the fire station, and the final payment on that debt will be made in the current fiscal year, so that debt is paid off. The general fund increased 6.7 million, and the water and sewer fund increased 1 million. And we will be going into further detail on the general fund next, and the water and sewer fund will be discussed at the next budget hearing. The general fund budget totals 125.4 million, and as seen on the previous slide, makes up over 53% of the total city budget. The general fund can be divided into the city's 8 departmental budgets as depicted here. You can see that the police, fire, and public works departments make up 64% of the general fund budget. The total general fund budget increased 5.6% or 6.7 million over the current year. And again, the main variances are listed here. 2.8 million in increased wages and benefits. That's about a 3.2% increase over the current year and is due to contractual wage increases, additional headcount, a net increase to the required contribution to pension and OPEB of about 500,000, and a proposed increase to the city 401A contribution for non-pension employees. Rubbish removal costs are increasing 1.5 million due to the expiration of the 8-year waste contract in April of 23 and the expected transition to mandatory carts and universal curbside recycling. The transfer to the capital projects fund is up about 500,000, primarily due to an allocation for alternative response vehicles for the fire department, and the transfer to major roads has increased by 500,000, bringing the total transfer amount to 1 million. Liability insurance costs have increased about 500,000 to be more in line with the current trends. The general fund transfer to Parks and Recreation Fund increased by 350,000, primarily for wage increases, additional part-time wages for seasonal employees, and an increase in the cost of contractual services for grass cutting, athletic field maintenance, and snow removal. And street lighting costs are increasing 200,000 due to a 15% rate hike from DTE. Inflationary increases across multiple line items such as fuel and building maintenance make up the balance of the difference, bringing us to this year's total proposed budget of $125.4 million. Compared to the current year's amended budget, the proposed budget includes a net increase of 9 full-time positions across all funds. Proposed new positions include the city's first DEI officer, a GIS specialist for the Information Technology Department, and a purchasing coordinator position are also proposed. The assistant city planner position was previously approved by council, but is new headcount in the budget. 3 part-time positions are proposed to be converted to full-time: an electrical inspector, a senior payroll clerk, and a librarian. And outside the general fund, a recreation supervisor to oversee evening activities is proposed, and a second social worker funded through proceeds from the National Opioid Settlement. A net increase of 8 part-time positions is also included. 13 intern positions are proposed, which would bring the total number of budgeted interns to 20, as part of the launching of a new internship program designed to promote careers in local government to college students. As you can see in this graph, the city has been strategically adding back full-time personnel over the past 10 years. However, we are still down 118 positions from the high of 630 full-time positions in 2008. And at 4 full-time employees per 1,000 residents, we still rank lower than all of our comparable communities and significantly lower than communities like Lansing, Grand Rapids, and Southfield that have nearly double the amount of employees per 1,000 residents. Estimated general fund revenues total $125.4 million and broken down here into the major categories. Property taxes still make up most of the general fund revenue at 62%. Total general fund revenues increased by $6.3 million or 5.3%. Taxes from the city operating and Safe Streets millages increased $3.75 million due to an overall rise in taxable value of 7.1%. The inflationary increase that most residents will see is 5%, which is the capped amount allowed under state law. Actual inflation was 7.9% this year. The remainder of the increase comes from growth and home sales resulting in the uncapping of values. There is no rollback in millage rates this year for the first time in many years. Revenue from the refuse millage is increasing by $1.5 million, resulting from the expected increase in refuse costs that we discussed earlier. Revenue from the police and fire pension tax will increase about $275,000 due to an increase in the required contribution. And again, there is no increase in the city millage rate this year. State shared revenue is projected to be about $550,000 higher than last year's budget, and this is based on estimates from the state of Michigan. And total state shared revenue will be about $15.8 million this year. Court fines are expected to continue to increase due to a renewed focus on traffic enforcement and the additional officers hired for the directed patrol unit. And the ongoing higher interest rates have increased investment income in the general fund by about $400,000. And finally, federal grant revenue is expected to be lower as the SAFER grant, which funded a portion of the salaries for 6 firefighters for a 3-year period, comes to an end. The proposed city millage rate for the 2023 tax year is the same as last year at 16.38 mils. The average taxable value for a home in Sterling Heights is just under $92,000 as of the current assessment roll, and that's an increase of about $6,300 over last year's average. This equates to a home with a market value of over $256,000, meaning the taxable value for the average resident is only about 36% of their market value. The annual city taxes on the average home will be $1,506, which equates to $125 per month for all city services, and that's about $8 per month higher than last year. But as you can see from this chart, the city's tax rate still continues to be one of the lowest in the county. The expected general fund revenues exceed proposed expenditures by just under $37,000, resulting in an addition to fund balance. Cumulative fund balance continues to be very strong and is projected to total $35.3 million at the end of fiscal year 2024, just over 28% of expenditures. A very healthy level that will allow the city to continue to invest in city services and infrastructure while maintaining a low tax rate. Next, let's look at the special revenues funds, 11 funds totaling $36.7 million. The major and local road funds make up over 57% of the special revenues and total $21 million, to fund the maintenance and repairs to the city's major roads and local neighborhood streets. The next largest fund is the Parks and Recreation Fund, which makes up 27.5% of special revenues and totals $10.1 million. Parks and Rec will be discussed in detail at the April 25th budget workshop. The major and local road funds both receive funding through gas and weight tax revenue, often called Act 51 revenue, from the state of Michigan. Road funding for 2024 is expected to increase about $300,000 over what was received in 2023. The city's share of proposed major road projects totals $6.7 million and includes repairs to Moravian from Shaner to Hayes, Metro Parkway from Mound to Ryan, Pondview from 19 Mile to Maple Leaf Court, and Maple Lane from 14 Mile to Volpe. Safe Streets revenue continues to fund the repair and reconstruction of neighborhood streets, and for the first time in many years, there was no rollback in this millage rate. This year, Safe Streets revenue, in combination with Act 51 revenue, will fund the repair and reconstruction of 30 neighborhood streets. The remaining special revenue funds include $900,000 for the Community Development Block Grant, which is funded with federal dollars. Funded is including for housing rehabilitation and minor home repairs. The renovation of the Beaver Creek Park parking lot is also included this year. Public safety forfeiture funds total $700,000 for equipment and supplies for the police department through the use of proceeds from seized property. The ongoing replacement of police investigative vehicles is funded using forfeitures. The Indigent Defense Fund tracks revenue expenses related to rules implemented by the state regarding legal counsel for indigent defendants. It is funded through grant proceeds from the state and totals $500,000. The American Rescue Plan Fund was created to track expenditures for the $20 million the city received through the American Rescue Plan. The proposed budget of $600,000 includes funding for retention pond maintenance and temporary code enforcement. Additional projects are in the development stage, and these projects will be brought to City Council for approval and budget amendments as they are finalized. New this year, the Opioid Settlement Fund was created to track the revenue and associated expenditures related to the national opioid settlement. The city will receive approximately $2.6 million over the next 18 years as part of this settlement, and the funds have restrictions on their use. The proposed budget includes $100,000 of funding for a second full-time social worker and for a community health study. The Local Development Finance Authority uses tax capture revenue to fund the Velocity Business Incubator and other smart zone activities. This year's budget of $2 million also includes the resurfacing of the parking lot at Velocity. And finally, the Brownfield Redevelopment Fund uses tax capture to reimburse eligible brownfield project costs to encourage the redevelopment of contaminated and obsolete properties. The current brownfield is related to the redevelopment of the old Liberty Park site and includes $800,000 in eligible reimbursements. Next, the capital project funds total $7.6 million and include the use of proceeds from road bonds as well as $5.8 million of investment in capital projects, equipment, and vehicles. The road bond construction fund budget includes the final $1.8 million for the city's share of the $230 million reconstruction of Mound Road. The city's total share of $36.1 million represents 16% of the total project cost. The remainder is funded through a $98 million federal grant, as well as contributions from Macomb County, the City of Warren, and the State of Michigan. Proposed capital projects, vehicles, and equipment total $5.8 million. Some highlights include the modernization of the elevators at the police department, the replacement of the skylights at the police department and the library, the installation of a children's music garden at the library, replacing the parking lot at Fire Station Number 1, park improvements at Clinton River, Carpathia, and Mark Sawyer's Family Park, the continuation of the sidewalk repair program, as well as the purchase of vehicles and equipment that will be detailed later throughout the departmental presentations. Finally, the debt service funds total $8 million and provide funding for the debt payments on outstanding road bonds and bonds for the new facilities renovations and the new DPW building. Again, the voter-approved debt on the fire station will be paid off this year. An update to the legal debt margin calculation in the fiscal year 2022 audit shows that the city is well within its legal debt margin. In fact, the city has used just 1/4 of the amount allowed by law, and there are no new debt issuances planned in the upcoming fiscal year. In addition, this slide shows the updated road bond debt limit calculation. Debt service on road bonds is limited to 50% of Act 51 revenue received from the state of Michigan. Our total road bond debt service is just over $5 million annually and is over $2.3 million below the maximum allowable debt service, which puts us at about 68% of our limit. And you can see here that the percent of our limit used will increase slightly in fiscal year 23 due to the debt service on the second Mound Road bond that was issued in May of 22. But after that, debt service will stay relatively stable for a few years and then start to decrease as earlier bonds are paid off. This chart summarizes all debt service payments included in the 2024 budget along with their funding sources. Nearly all city-issued debt has a dedicated funding source. For example, the bonds issued to fund the recreating recreation initiatives like the Dodge Park renovations and the community center are funded through the recreating recreation millage, and the road bonds are funded through Act 51 revenues. In fact, 85% of annual city debt service has a dedicated funding source. Only $3 million of annual debt service is funded using general fund dollars, and this is for the debt on the facility renovations and the DPW building. And this debt service equates to only 2.5% of the total general fund expenditures. Now, the 4 departments that we are reviewing tonight. First up, city administration. This city administration is made up of 8 separate departments with 61 full-time and 16 part-time staff. And the departments include city management, city clerk, facilities maintenance, information technology, and also assessing, financial services, purchasing, and treasury. The city administration budget totals $13.2 million, and the split between the individual offices is depicted here. The city administration budget increased by $730,000 or 5.9%. Personnel costs are up $580,000 due to contractual wage increases, as well as the addition of the DEI officer, a GIS specialist, and a purchasing coordinator, and 4 interns are also included in this office. The increase in other charges of $120,000 includes cost increases in snow removal, custodial, and security system maintenance, as well as information technology expenditures for help desk software and moving the police WatchGuard system to the cloud. Capital equipment and vehicles related to city admin includes a new mail machine for the city clerk's office, a replacement gator for facilities maintenance, replacement personal computers throughout the division, a core switch replacement for information technology, and grant-funded election laptops and software. Next is the police department, which is the largest department, totaling 33% of the general fund budget. The department has 218 employees in 4 divisions, and the budget totals $41 million. Over 92% of the budget is personnel costs. The police department budget increased by $860,000 or 2.1%, which is almost entirely in personnel costs and consists of contractual wage increases and the addition of a full-time social worker and 2 interns. As mentioned earlier, the social worker is funded with the proceeds from the opioid settlement. Funding for 89 replacement bulletproof vests that are out of warranty is also included. Highlights from the capital budget include the modernization of the elevators and the replacement of the skylights at the police station, the replacement of 10 patrol cars, the purchase of backup radio equipment, and the replacement of 10 handheld speed measuring devices. The purchase of rifle-rated shields as well as K9 night vision is funded using forfeitures. The fire department budget totals $25.3 million and represents 20% of the total general fund budget. The department has 3 divisions and includes 110 full-time and 3 part-time positions. The department budget increased by $625,000 or 2.5%. It is almost entirely in personnel and is due to contractual wage increases. The budget also includes the purchase of a maintenance plan, which will reduce the cost of repairs and maintenance on a variety of fire equipment, and funding for a deployment analysis to determine the best use of department resources. Capital highlights include the replacement of an ALS ambulance, an allocation for the potential purchase of alternative response vehicles, and the continued replacement of turnout gear and cardiac monitors. The replacement of a commercial stove for Fire Station Number 5 and the resurfacing of the parking lot at Fire Station Number 1 is also included. Our last department for tonight is Community Relations, which totals $2 million and equates to about 1.5% of the general fund budget. The department includes 8 full-time and 3 part-time positions. The Community Relations budget decreased by $95,000, primarily due to the branding strategy that's budgeted in the current year. The proposed budget includes funding for a broadcast services intern and a flyover by the Tuskegee Airmen for the Memorial Day Parade. Proposed capital for this department includes a new playback server, which is necessary to continue to air city content on cable television, and additional funding is also included to continue the public art program. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my overview for tonight, and I will turn it back over to Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Continuing on, the city's most important asset, as we all know, is our employees who work very hard every day, taking great pride in their jobs. Many work around the clock, providing high level of services that residents and businesses have come to expect over the years. I was reminded of the sacrifices our employees make when I saw a DPW road crew patching Clinton River a couple of days ago on Easter Sunday morning. These individuals, including our police and fire personnel, had to miss church services, Easter egg hunts with their kids and grandchildren. Had to miss the opportunity to simply relax on a beautiful Sunday morning. While the work in this particular case could have waited until Monday, the commitment to excellence from our employees required more immediate action. Our guiding principle in human relations is to do all that is possible to not only retain top talent, but to ensure we're continuing to attract employees who can meet these very high standards. There are plenty of challenges in doing so. Our Human Resources Manager, Kate Baldwin, will discuss the many initiatives underway to ensure the city's commitment to excellence continues and, to the extent possible, is improved. It's all about continuous improvement. So at this point, Mayor, I'd like to introduce our Human Relations Benefit Manager, Kate Baldwin, who will lead the next presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Kashubski, and members of the City Council. Tonight, I'll be speaking on employee retention, or retaining our human assets. Throughout this presentation, I'll be sharing some statistics, initiatives, benefits, and opportunities that we've put in place over the last few years or so, and will also share some initiatives, benefits, and opportunities coming in the near future as it relates to our employees. As each of us know in this room, the overall success of Sterling Heights over the course of its 50-plus year history is attributable to its strong leadership and the dedication of our employees. If you recall, a couple years ago, myself and Mr. Bohorsky, Jeff Bohorsky, our Assistant City Manager, HR Director, sat before you during a strategic planning session, and we presented on innovating our human assets and discussed the ways in which the city was investing in its employees at the time. During that strategic planning session, it was emphasized how Sterling Heights has an excellent reputation, from its safe drinking water to the outstanding police and fire protection in which our residents rely on and benefit from. I think we'd all agree that our talented, dedicated, productive, and well-trained public employees are critical to our reputation. This, of course, has not changed, and we continue to strive to not only employ the best of the best, but retain the best of the best, so that we can continue the excellence that our employees provide to our residents and community. So let's dive into some of the benefits, initiatives, and opportunities that are currently provided, some of which have been implemented only in the last couple of years. In 2018, for the first time ever, the city implemented the parental leave benefit, which provides full pay to new parents. Since 2018, we've had a total of 101 employees utilize this benefit. On this slide, you can see some very cute baby pictures. And these are babies that our employees have welcomed into the world and who have benefited from the parental leave. The city provides various opportunities for professional development and connection through our newly tagline training program, Sterling Varsity. To name a few of the components of Sterling Varsity, the program incorporates our popular interdepartmental Sterling U, which we will be bringing back, a learning management system called Knowledge City, both a Munch and Learn series and Coffee House Connection series where we have speakers come in and discuss various topics and much more. On this slide here, that's an actual picture of the training catalog that our Community Relations Department put together, and it has sort of a collegiate feel. Another benefit offering includes our Employee Health and Wellness Center in the lower level of City Hall. You are most likely familiar with our center, which is provided to our full-time employees, their spouses, and dependents on the city's health insurance plan, where they can receive numerous health benefits from the physician and nurse pictured here on the slide. And those health benefits are inclusive of acute and chronic care management, a medication dispensary that's on site, preventative care, labs, and much more. Not to mention our employees save money utilizing the center. I also want to mention the many benefits afforded to employees by way of the collective bargaining union agreements. This slide provides a small snapshot of benefits that are included in those agreements. Everything from competitive market pay, medical, dental, vision at either no cost or a very low premium, tuition reimbursement, education stipends for degreed professionals, performance pay, retiree health savings account where the city makes a generous contribution, funeral leave, pension plan for our police and fire employees, a 401A plan for employees with the generous city match, 12 paid holidays, generous PTO, short and long-term disability benefits at no cost, and life insurance at no cost. Needless to say, the parental leave, training opportunities, on-site health and wellness center, the benefits provided by way of the CBA all demonstrate a few of the offerings we provide to our employees. And as you can see, the city has made a lot of progress in creative benefit and opportunity solutions in which all contribute to the overall employee retention. Now, many of us are aware the job market has shifted during the COVID-19 pandemic. It accelerated a mass exodus of employees on a nationwide basis. As an organization, we are not immune from this. Let's provide a little more insight on what our organization has experienced with respect to staff turnover. Reflected within this slide shows our turnover rates year over year from fiscal year 19 to current. These statistics include only our unionized labor workforce, both part-time and full-time. As you can see within the slide, in fiscal year 19, we had a 4.75% turnover rate. In fiscal year 20, it increased to 5.38%. In fiscal year 21, it increased to 8.58%. And we are anticipated to have a 9.26% turnover rate for this current fiscal year. Most notably, you can see the jump from fiscal year 20 into fiscal year 21. That's just over a 3% bump. As mentioned earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated exits across the nation, and in 2020 is where the nation as a whole saw a bump in employee exits or separations. But let's dive in a little bit deeper. Now that we know what our turnover rates are, we could take a look at how many of our unionized workforce separated from the city. This slide includes all separations, inclusive of retirement, voluntary resignations, involuntary separations, etc. In fiscal year 19, we had a total of 28 people exit. In fiscal year 20, we had 31. The following year, in fiscal year 21, we had 53, and we're projected to have 57 people separate from the city in this current fiscal. To further dive in, this pie chart reflects the total average of retirements and total average of separations over those fiscal years, including this fiscal. Over the course of these 4 fiscals, we've seen an average of 44% employees leave the city due to retirement, and 56 employees have left the city for other separation reasons. So why does tracking turnover matter to us? To give you some context, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes metrics on employment data. And a metric we came across concluded that in 2019, the total separations were registered at 3.5 million. In July of 2022, the number of separations increased to 4.2 million. That is a 20% increase, 20% higher than pre-pandemic levels. So what should we strive for as an organization? This has been discussed in many resources and amongst HR professionals. And best practice is to aim for a turnover rate of 10% or less. Now remember, our projected turnover rate in this current fiscal is targeted to be 9.26%. We are lower than the 10%, but we are getting closer and closer to that threshold. We have done a good job at retaining our employees, and I think we can attribute this to the many benefits and opportunities that are currently offered, and we can certainly attribute this to the dedication of our employees. However, we do have to stay ahead of the curve and strive to keep our turnover lower. If we're not ahead of the curve and continue to see our turnover increase, there are certain consequences. So what happens when we don't retain our employees? Just as any other organization, we experience turnover costs and having to spend time and efforts in recruitment, onboarding, and training new hires. We experience loss of knowledge as when we have our employees leave the organization, they most times carry with them legacy knowledge of our processes, practices, and procedures. We experience loss of productivity as when a position is left vacant for a period of time, either the work is not being done or the work is being shifted to someone else in the organization who may have to pick up those pieces. Higher turnover also creates a lower morale amongst the workforce. When we have a significant amount of separations in the organization, it has a negative connotation that spreads throughout. And most importantly, the lack of retention can negatively impact the level of service that we provide to our residents and community. So what are we going to do about it? Employees and candidates are now, more than ever, placing an emphasis on their expectations with opportunities for professional growth, benefits, and work-life balance. Because of this, employers have to be even more creative in their offerings to be competitive. More recently, the city has started exploring various ways in which we can meet the expectations of our employees and the candidate pools. Let's take a look at some of the upcoming benefits and opportunities to further help with employee retention. The city started reimagining flexibility in the workplace, and to accommodate expectations of the workforce, the 980 schedule was introduced within the organization. Our executive and supervisory groups have officially started on this schedule, which allows for every other Friday off. That's an additional 26 days off per year. And to give my own personal testimony, I've been on this schedule since I think it's been mid-March, and I look forward to my Fridays off to have more time for myself. And I'm also looking forward to being able to get a head start on heading up north with my family and having longer weekends at our family cabin. More organizations are transitioning to the 4-day work week model, and we look forward to introducing this model further into the organization. This upcoming fiscal year, the city has also budgeted for a greater 401A match for employees. Currently, employees receive anywhere from a 4 to a 5.5% city match on their 401A. And with the budgeted enhancement, the city contribution will increase to 7%. This will allow employees to bolster their retirement accounts and better prepare for their futures in retirement. We are also now doing advanced hiring and recently piloted the advanced hiring program within our fire department. With this approach, particular to the fire department, we are going to conduct recruitment once per year. And prior to launching the recruitment, we determine how many anticipated retirements or separations may occur in that upcoming year. And then we hire ahead for those positions. The advanced hiring avoids any gaps in terms of headcount and leaves the department fully staffed. More importantly, when we use the advanced hiring technique, it gives us the competitive advantage at hiring the best of the best in the candidate pool. As you all are aware, we've embarked on our DE&I journey about 1.5 years ago or so. Through that journey, our DE&I Employee Council has frameworked a 3-year strategy. The 3-year strategy touches on many different facets within the organization, and more importantly to note, for purposes of employee retention, there are specific components of the DEI strategy that will address employee retention. This includes creating a sense of belonging for all employees and creating an environment where employees can be their authentic selves and contribute their ideas. By integrating DE&I into the organization's culture and building an environment where voices are heard and people can be their authentic selves, they tend to stay with the organization. Human Resources is also making a concerted effort in creating a more engaging and meaningful experience for both candidates who are going through the recruitment process and our new hires who are freshly starting with the organization. We are implementing more communication touch points with candidates through their recruitment experience, which allows us to better build relationships and connections with candidates. Over the last couple of years, Human Resources has also implemented a more robust orientation for our new hires when they transition into the organization. This includes spending more time with them to give them the tools and resources that they need as they onboard. We've also implemented various touch points for new hires and their respective managers during their first year of employment. The flyer on this slide is an example of a checklist that our new hires receive, and it includes things like meeting with their managers. I know it's difficult to read, but it includes things like meeting with their managers, their teammates, signing up for professional development courses, whether that be through Knowledge City or signing up for one of the other Sterling varsity programs. But the hiring managers also get a checklist as well with recommended touch points with their new hires. The purpose of this is to encourage a sense of belonging and allowing for more connection between the new hire and the organization. And as Ms. Varney had mentioned in her presentation, for the first time ever, the city is implementing a formal college internship program where we will be bringing in 20 interns across all departments. The internship program will begin in mid-May, and the program will allow interns to connect with one another for a meaningful experience. We have a robust orientation plan for them to gain knowledge and insight of all city operations. And throughout the internship program, we have various events and programs scheduled to allow them to connect with one another and with stakeholders and leaders in the organization, including our city council. Our goals in the internship program are to create a space for the interns to bond, build professional relationships with our workforce and community, allow the interns to discover careers in the municipal public sector, and most notably, it gives us a potential opportunity to prepare future employees of the city. I know I can speak on behalf of our department directors and managers when I say that we are very excited to have our interns joining the organization and looking forward to having them contribute and accelerate some of the meaningful initiatives and projects that our departments and offices are spearheading. All of these benefits and opportunities will be critical to the future of our workforce and employee retention. We will continue to monitor expectations of our employees and candidates, and will continue to find new and creative benefit opportunity solutions for the organization to remain as a competitive employer. Retaining our employees has many benefits, some of which I'm sure you all are aware of, and we talked a little bit about them earlier. We will experience reduced cost. The knowledge and expertise will remain in the organization. We'll see an increase in productivity, improved morale, and overall culture. We will experience higher engagement, and employees are just happier overall. And most importantly, by retaining our employees, we continue to provide excellent service to our residents and community. This concludes my presentation this evening. Thank you.
And Mayor, continuing on, it's exciting to know that all these initiatives and projects are included in the budget that you're reviewing through the hearings. And continuing on, a critically important part of our organization, but somewhat obscure part of our organization, is our purchasing division. Employees in this area work really hard to ensure taxpayers are getting the best possible pricing and service delivery on all the goods and services purchased throughout the year. This is no easy task, knowing that about $250 million worth of purchasing occurs in any given year, ranging from road improvements, building maintenance, tree purchases, vehicles, books, just to name a few. Everything you're hearing throughout the budget process is funneled through purchasing. There are plenty of challenges for purchasing, including supply chain delays. We've all heard about that, inflationary costs, labor force shortages, and the like. So our purchasing manager, Christine Jameson, will now discuss how the city's addressing the current market conditions and some new ideas that we have in mind to address them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Good evening, Mayor Taylor, City Council members, and Mr. Koszybski. I'm pleased to speak to you today regarding the purchasing department and our ongoing efforts for continuous improvement. Most people think of spending money when they think of purchasing. However, our main goal is to procure goods and services at the lowest competitive price while ethically acting in the city's best interest. Therefore, I approach purchasing with the purpose of assisting all departments in saving taxpayer dollars while maintaining an ethical, efficient process for doing so. In an effort to reach our goals in purchasing and the city, there are several new initiatives in purchasing. Today, we'll discuss a new contract management system, the supplier landscape, and the current marketplace and how it affects our current purchasing bid process. In December of 2022, a license was purchased through BidNet for a contract management module. Prior to this contract management system, all of our contracts were managed through Microsoft Excel, and some departments managed their own contracts. Contracts ran the risk of expiring prior to an official renewal. The new system allows for automated notifications of insurance expiration, bond renewals, and contract extension options. Valuable reports are also available, such as expiration notifications, awards made by vendor, contract value awarded to vendors, just to name a few. Eventually, once all contracts are in the system, directors can be automatically notified of contracts requiring their attention. Since purchasing supports all departments, it was important to have a system with transparency and accessibility for directors to have access to the system. Implementation of the new system is currently in Phase 2. Phase 1 included transferring over all of our current bids and contracts, reaching over the $10,000 threshold, that were competitively bid in BidNet over to the contract management side. With over 100 contracts now complete, we are entering Phase 2. Phase 2 and 3 will include manually entering all contracts and service agreements that purchasing is aware of and from all the other departments for a centralized reservoir of information. Most of these are under the $10,000 bid threshold. Phase 4 will include the implementation of a vendor performance system where directors and managers will be regularly asked to evaluate vendors. This will assist with contract extensions and identify potential issues. All of this information is important to evaluate supplier agreements. Through the Mitten system, efforts have been made to increase the pool of potential bidders. The overall supplier base in Mitten grew 16% so far this fiscal year. The Mitten system now provides a pool of over 19,000 suppliers interested in doing businesses with municipalities. Approximately 36% of all registered suppliers have identified as disabled, veteran-owned, disadvantaged, minority-owned, woman-owned, or historically underutilized business. In 2022, approximately 24% of all bids received were from a self-identified diverse supplier. Our efforts to cast a wide net for all interested suppliers is a benefit of the Mitten system. With the increased number in available suppliers, the end result will be to drive down pricing through increased competition. However, the marketplace is changing too. The current marketplace is still feeling the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Inflation continues to rise. Labor shortages and supply chain issues are both still common occurrences. Let's take a look at each of these and how they're affecting purchasing. Container shipments around the world continue to be a challenge and increase cost, sometimes causing extended lead times in unexpected industries. We are all familiar with the vehicle shortages. Manufacturers have refused to confirm pricing for an extended length of time, and even the state of Michigan could not get them to hold pricing for governmental entities. The state of Michigan has now suggested a list of dealerships to call for a quote on fleet vehicles. However, the city has also experienced extended lead times for items such as ammunition for the police department and some parts needed at DPW Water and Sewer due to raw material shortages. These extended lead times can make it difficult for the city to make efficient purchases. An increasing number of vendors are unable to commit to a longer-term contract with the current market conditions. Add in labor shortages, and several vendors do not have the staff or capability to comply with our bid submission forms. Vendors prefer to provide a standardized quote in their format. Providing quotes is more efficient for vendors. They can track them in their proprietary system and have access to their inventories and can provide availability information faster. With this in mind, alternate purchasing processes should be explored. The solicitation of quotes instead of a formal bid procedure would help speed up the competitive pricing process for some purchases. Everyone is feeling the effects of increased inflation. From groceries to heating and cooling, every household and business is feeling the pinch. These inflationary costs also affect purchasing and the city's ability to stretch dollars to provide necessary services. As mentioned, today's marketplace inflation has caused vendors' unwillingness to commit to a longer-term contract. In order to combat this, we have seen the industry increase the use of cost escalators or reduce the term. This does create an increase in more frequent reviews of bids with escalators and more frequent bidding overall, i.e., more work for purchasing and department directors. If we look at a recent example with paper, the paper market has seen a substantial increase over the last 12 to 18 months. Vendors do not want to commit to a long-term contract because they don't know their own pricing month to month. This can cause multiple issues. The vendors may choose not to bid at all, or if vendors do bid, they may be inflating their pricing to cover their projected inflationary cost. When we recently tried to bid out the paper for a 6-month period, we only received one bid. Upon further evaluation, it was determined that the local suppliers were unwilling to bid due to the unstable market prices, and the bid received was highly inflated. The bid was rejected because of these reasons. It was in the best interest of the city to purchase paper at the time of need from quotes provided by known sources. This is just one example of the bid process not yielding the most beneficial results for residents. With the current marketplace conditions, our bid procedure effectiveness has been diminished. Even though we have access to a growing number of suppliers through Mitten, we are seeing a reduction in number of bid respondents overall. In 2022, our average number of bids received per bid was 3.12. So far in 2023, our average bids received per bid has dropped to 2.85. This has been a trend several Michigan municipalities have been facing. This can be attributed to some of the reasons we have described today. Vendors find the bid process cumbersome, or they have no staff to complete the bids, or when we try to combat the current market conditions with a shorter-term contract, sometimes the contract value is decreased and the vendors still choose not to bid. In 2023, we have seen a growing number of bids receive only one bid. In 2022, 15% of all bids solicited received one bid. So far in 2023, 30% of all solicitations have received only one bid. Neither help the city to determine the most competitive price or the best service providers. The current bid procedure is also very time-consuming. Specifications are drafted by departments, reviewed and edited by purchasing, and eventually posted electronically. Some bids are open for 2 to 4 weeks to try and encourage vendors to bid. However, we have not seen an increase in number of bids received with a longer open time period. After bids are received and evaluated, then the process starts for preparing documents for City Council to approve the purchase. Agendas are written and support documents are gathered. With council meetings happening twice a month, it can take an additional 3 weeks to officially award a bid and get projects started. The purchasing department and city management have been evaluating possible solutions to the problems. Having the ability to rely more heavily on vendor quotes and quickly make decisions will help in some cases. More importantly, several municipalities have recognized this problem and have already increased their thresholds for formal bids and council approvals. Let's take a look. Here is a chart of the bid thresholds for some other cities and counties. West Bloomfield recently went from $7,500 threshold to $25,000 threshold for both their bids and council approval. Grand Rapids increased their bid threshold to $50,000, and some changes made in November of 2022 also authorized some purchase up to $100,000 without council approval. Rochester Hills thresholds are currently at $25,000 for both, and even the city of Sturgis, which is way smaller, is at $30,000. These are just a few examples. The current bid threshold in Sterling Heights is $10,000. However, with the invention of the internet, the effects of inflation, and the current market conditions, it is imperative that other processes be considered and to obtain competitive pricing for lower valued purchases. Sterling Heights is considered the 4th largest city in Michigan and a leader within Macomb County. As such, we should consider an ordinance change allowing competitive pricing to be obtained through an alternate quote process and increasing the bid threshold from $10,000 to $50,000. A $50,000 threshold is suggested because projects are legally required to be bonded at $50,000. And it is close to the inflated value of the $5,000 originally determined in 1968. Also, vendors are not putting in the bid effort for the lower valued contracts. The lower the value of the potential contract, the fewer bid responses we seem to get. So far in 2023, 67% of bids that were valued under $50,000 only received one bid. Internally, all purchases between $10,000 and $50,000 would require a solicitation of 3 to 5 quotes. Purchases above $10,000 would still require council approval, and if the obtained pricing seems unfavorable, the competitive bidding process is still an option. All purchases will still require the purchase order that is routed through the Office of Purchasing, Budget, and Finance prior to approval to ensure funds are available. Authorizing more options to acquire competitive pricing in today's marketplace will ensure a process that is more efficient and will yield better results. As inflation has diminished the appeal of lower valued contracts, with an adjustment to the bid threshold, the city will also have the ability to quickly and efficiently authorize purchases that will benefit the residents. Suggested ordinance changes will be proposed to City Council within 60 days for a more formal review. And eventually, reviewing the City Council approval threshold to mirror the bid threshold through a charter amendment would be judicious. In conclusion, purchasing assists with every purchase in the city, and we collaborate with every department. Purchasing is the backbone that provides the checks and balances for all purchases. We review over 1,000 purchase orders a year, and we monitor over 3,000 P-card purchases. We ensure contract pricing is upheld. We develop, evaluate, and recommend the award of bids to ensure all departments have the products and services they need to provide residents the best possible value. Most importantly, purchasing is responsible for making sure a competitive process is upheld to ensure the city gets the best possible pricing. As discussed today, that can be through a formal bid process, RFP, or potentially quotes. Providing ordinance changes to utilize quotes more competitively and increasing the bid threshold will assist with providing purchasing the tools needed to ensure competitive pricing is achieved. Thank you for your time this evening.
And Mayor, we're on to our final two presentations centered on public safety. It goes without saying, we all know that Sterling Heights is blessed to have we have one of the safest communities in the country, and it's due to the mayor and city council's continued support of state-of-the-art equipment and training and so on, and also, most importantly, because of the dedicated employees in these areas. So now the police chief, Dale Wojciechowski, is going to highlight the many initiatives underway in the proposed budget in the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool, Mayor Taylor, and members of council. It's my pleasure to present the 23-24 budget for you and some oversight to some of the bigger projects we've been able to accomplish and what we hope to accomplish next year. Those being, as you know, last year, closing of our jail, one of the biggest things we've done in many, many years, which was allowed us to hire 7 new officers to start our new Directed Patrol Unit and our Community Services Unit. And also taking control and charge over the federal anti-narcotics team of Macomb. That is the new drug unit that services Macomb County. We are now in charge of that team. That just recently happened. I want to cover that as well. And a new comfort dog program that we're proposing. As you know, December of 2021, we closed our jail. And since that time, we have processed 2,436 arrests. And we've had timely video arraignments with those arrests and minimal issues. And I'd like to thank the 41A District Court for working with us hand in hand to get this done, because it was a big change on their end, but we did get it done. We've also decreased the medical standbys. When we ran our own jail every single night, we called it incarceritis, which meant a prisoner didn't want to be in jail. They wanted to be at the hospital, so we'd have to send an officer to the jail to babysit the bad guy and then come back to the jail. We no longer have to do that using the county because the county has a full medical staff 24/7. It just makes sense for liability, possible suicide attempts, so many other reasons to not house prisoners inside of Sterling Heights. And also, Macomb County Jail just started a new software program called Jail Tracker. With Jail Tracker, detectives can now do photo lineups because they have access to every single person that is brought into the Macomb County Sheriff's Department jail. And it also allows officers to do the booking card right in their car before they even get the prisoner out of the car, and the bond slip all digitally. It gets sent right to the intake officer. So we're very excited about that, and the Sheriff's Department's been great with helping us manage our conversion process. And not to mention, the biggest thing is we saved a lot of money by closing our jail. Enough money to hire 7 new police officers, which are serving Sterling Heights every single day. In a big way, one of those things is the Directed Patrol Unit, brand new. They just got up and running in August of this last year. There's our Directed Patrol, Sergeant Majeski. We have 3 cars. We have 2 two-man cars, and the sergeant has his own car. They're out there every single night. They work afternoon shift, and they have been very, very busy. This slide I put promises kept, because I remember when I met with council last year, we talked about this plan, and several council people said, hey, I will do this, but you have to promise me you're going to be in the neighborhoods. You're going to be more visible. That's what our residents want. And I can say promises were kept. We are in the neighborhood. We are writing tickets. We are taking traffic enforcement, and we're arresting bad guys. And you can see here, just in 6 months, this Directed Patrol Unit has made 97 felony arrests. 71 misdemeanor arrests, and 211 times have done details in subdivisions and neighborhoods throughout Sterling Heights. They've made over 1,500 traffic stops and wrote 671 tickets. I have a little testimonial here from Mr. Zetkowski. As you know, he's showed up at council before and talked about issues on Viceroy, and I want to do a little quick recap about his experience with the police department, residential enforcement. So with that, I'll get this video playing.
I saw a lot of reckless driving on our streets and speeding. I got passed several times by cars. There was one fellow who ran the school bus. He had the signs out and the flashers going, and this guy just disregarded it and blasted through. For about the last year or so, there's been a lot of reckless driving and speeding on our street. And I brought this to the council's attention and the police chief's attention, and I got a response like right away. I'd like to bring some visibility to the issue of reckless driving and speeding vehicles on my street. It's Viceroy Drive between 14 and 15 mile roads. I said I'd like to have a few more speed limit signs put on, maybe a few stop signs in the street, because Viceroy goes from 14 to 15 mile without any stop signs. I also mentioned that when my wife and I were in Plymouth, Michigan for a craft fair down there, I noticed on the side streets they had painted slow 25 miles an hour speed limit. And I suggested that they do that sort of thing. And, I got a real good response from the city manager on that. He said they're gonna do that as a pilot program for the city. I also got a tremendous response from Lieutenant David Allen. He sent me emails and he made phone calls and everything, letting me know the number of citations that were sent out, the number of accidents that were down on Viceroy. He just did a tremendous job of researching the stuff and giving me information back right away. I didn't expect that kind of a response from our police department. David Allen was just tremendous. How fast he responded and with the amount of information he brought back. Very pleased with that.
All right, you can see this all just happened on Monday, so I think our SHTV guys and Dan Rizek, they went out and filmed this on Monday, made the final cut. This is brand new for us in Sterling Heights. These are thermoplastic applications that you saw how they were installed. Quite complex, actually. Took them half a day to put these things in. They have to be melted right onto the concrete. So it's a pilot project. Viceroy, as you know, is a mile long. We have one at the north end and at the south end, and we're going to see what happens. So another, I think, success and one happy resident. Yeah. Again, moving with the Directed Patrol Unit, since August, they've made 91 narcotics arrests. We're seeing an uptick in methamphetamine, and the top picture there, those are meth pipes, and we're getting those frequently. A lot, large-scale marijuana, and then the bottom white packets there is cocaine and crack cocaine. So we're getting it all, and those Directed Patrol officers are finding it everywhere. More seriously and concerning, to be honest with you, the Directed Patrol Unit just since August has seized 15 guns. In the gun, in particular attention here, the bottom row of pictures, the gun in the middle, that is what we call a ghost gun. That gun was bought piece by piece, the handle, the barrel, the mechanism, no serial numbers or anything. It's untraceable, and the bad guys love them because they're not registered, obviously, and he's got an extended magazine in there with 25 rounds, and this is what's floating around. Not only Sterling Heights, we're seeing this statewide increase of ghost guns, untraceable guns, and we're getting them off the street. To go further into the gun issue, you can see these are arrests involving guns. Prior to the COVID pandemic, 30 arrests involving guns. Then COVID hit, everything kind of shut down there for a while. Then in 2021, 49 guns taken off the streets through arrests. Last year, 2022, 117 guns taken off the road. So our guys are out there every single night. They're finding guns every single night, sometimes multiple times a week. I remember as a young officer here, if you got a gun off of somebody on the road, that was very unusual. And we're having it now multiple times per week. It's a real problem. It's a danger for our officers and a concern for our residents. But we're out there and we're doing our job. Also, not only the Director of Patrol, those 5 officers, but we're also able to beef up our Community Services Bureau. As you know, Community Service was Aaron Susella. He was a one-man bureau. He now has 2 people working full-time, kind of getting back to the day when we had a dedicated Community Services Bureau. And Larry and Kevin have stepped in and done some wonderful work in the 6-7 months they've been back there, doing a bunch of new projects. One of them called On Scene through SHTV. We're filming programming in restaurants and businesses, highlighting that police-community partnership. We already have a couple of these filmed. We're going to be playing these on our Facebook channels and on SHTV. Wonderful project. Thank you, SHTV. Another pilot project that we're just getting off the ground, this is called Badges Building Bridges, and we're targeting foster children, making sure that they have a positive role model, and this is going to be done through monthly outings with the child, and we'll hopefully ramp this up to include more foster children and with one large yearly outing. And the troubling thing about foster children, I didn't really know this until I kind of did a deeper dive. Within 18 months of emancipation, when you're aging out of the foster system, 40 to 50% of these kids become homeless, which is just sad beyond belief. And 20% of the U.S. prison population is comprised of former foster children. So these kids are absolutely at risk. So having more positive role modeling and mentoring, I think, is very important. Larry and Kevin also are starting a brand new podcast called Off the Cuff. We're going to bring in business owners. We're going to have elected officials and board members and commissioners and anyone that wants to talk about anything city related, we're going to do it. So they're getting that off the ground as well. And not to mention the other host of community programs that you're all very aware of. Hope Not Handcuffs, the Comeback Quick Response Team, that is the visits to people that have overdosed on opiates or any kind of drug. And then our brand new program, Redirect, which we're using every single week. When we arrest somebody for a low-level drug offense, maybe possession of, methamphetamine, they have, 1 piece of crack on them, they are a drug user. They're not a drug dealer. So putting them in jail for the night or the day does no good. They have to get off of the drug. So Redirect allows us to not make the custodial arrest. We're working in partnership with the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office, and we are telling that person, if you get into treatment and get support, we will dismiss these charges through the prosecutor's office. So that is brand new, and we're just getting this off the ground. And not to mention our Sterling Heights Drug-Free Coalition, which we started a few years ago. It's doing a lot of great work with a lot of good outings. The 41A District Court just recently started a sobriety court. And Kevin Coates, part of our community services, the liaison for that sobriety court. Great job by 41A getting that up and running. And not to mention our social worker, which is assigned to community, the Community Services Bureau. Other community programs is our recruitment team, which has been robust. As you know, trying to find officers that want to be officers has been challenging. Every department in the state is looking for them. We are not only getting them, but much more than some of our neighboring agencies because we're out traveling the entire state doing this. We have multiple LGBTQ liaisons assigned to the police department. Our robust Police Explorer program. We do car seat installations pretty much every single week. We offer babysitting and home alone safety classes together with the fire department. Our Citizens Police Academy, which is alive and well, we're doing 2 sessions per year with almost a waiting list to get in. And our social media presence, which is absolutely phenomenal. I thank Sergeant Susala for doing such a great job. We have over 25,000 followers on Facebook, just ridiculous feedback. And when we post a video or something, it's not uncommon to see thousands of hits and likes on those things. Other community programs, the CORE program. We do large quarterly outings with all of our CORE officers, not to mention the daily issues they have to deal with mediation, ongoing neighbor troubles. But the CORE program is alive and well, and those guys are doing great work. Smart Moves, our 10-week anti-drug program in all 19 elementary schools in the city, with 1,500 kids graduating every single year, is doing great. And our volunteer groups, our Citizens on Patrol, and our CERT program with our monthly meetings and training. We rely on those folks to help us out on our large scale events. Our social worker, Amy, and as you know, never had a social worker in Sterling Heights. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what was going to happen. And here we are over a year later, and it's been a success. 274 cases, 1 person. And as you know, we've covered hoarding and safe homes a lot. I'm going to show you a couple pictures here in a second, but hoarding mental health, substance use, domestic violence, family issues, child protection, elder protection, homeless issues, and disability. She has worked for the police department, the fire department, city hall, and council. I think in some way, shape, or form has asked for Amy's help and support in some kind of case. She has been doing a lot of work. She's also been involved with the Safe Home Task Force, the fire department peer support group, and through the county, the sexual assault response team, Macomb County Continuum of Care, the social workers and law enforcement network she joined. She's helped facilitate grief groups at the senior center, which was a big hit and much appreciated at the senior center. And she's facilitated mental health training to multiple cities within the police department. Here's a little picture of the before and after. Not only getting this house cleaned up, but changing someone's life. And when you get to this point, that picture on the left, it seems impossible to get out of that. And Amy helps through all of our county connections, state connections, and getting the family really involved to get that house cleaned up and get that person back on track. Moving on to Phantom, as you know, 4 years ago, we started a brand new drug team for just Macomb County. Myself and Commissioner Dwyer and Warren, we approached the DEA and said, we want a drug team here in Macomb County. And they said, okay, let's do it. So there is an 8-member drug team that's assigned to Macomb County. And Warren started supervision of this group 4 years ago. The lieutenant who was running that group is retiring. And Sergeant Schlegel from the Sterling Police Department is now the director, supervisor of the Phantom Drug group. And he'll be starting here within the next month, taking over that group of 8 officers, the 5 participating agencies, which is Chesterfield, Macomb County Sheriff, Sterling Heights, Clinton, and Warren, plus 3 DEA officers. So what does that mean? Sergeant Schlegel will be in direct command of the 8 officers on the task force. The DEA, just so you know, reimburses not only Sergeant Schlegel, but the other 2 officers we have working for the DEA, $20,000 in overtime costs every single year, and a % of forfeited funds for the supervisor positions. 20% of forfeited illicit narcotics money are returned directly back to the city to help further offset costs. This, as you know, the picture on the right, that was a recent case, 18,000 pills of fentanyl found right here in Sterling Heights. Our local drug team did this. And this was directly from a drug cartel in Mexico through Arizona, California, all the way up to Michigan. And here we are with enough fentanyl to kill thousands of people in Sterling Heights. It's out there. We're getting it every single day. And lastly, our Comfort Dog program. A lot of departments have went to a Comfort Dog, and you might be asking, what is a Comfort Dog? Well, it's definitely not a canine that's used for tracking and aggression work, but this is a different program. It's to provide comfort for people that need emotional support. The dog gets specialty training to become a therapy dog, and the handler still does his normal job. He just has the Comfort Dog, he or she has a Comfort Dog with them. And how is it going to be used? Well, to be honest with you, 50% of the time that dog's going to be in the station being used for our own officers. This is a tough job, and these officers come to work every single day. They have to deal with some of the worst thing that humanity has to offer. That dog being in a police station, I've seen it even with our normal canines, everyone loves a dog, and they love it when that dog walks through the office area. So if this can bring some joy and some peace to our officers, I'm 100% for it. And not only mention internally, but all of our external events and outings and national night out, you name it, to have this dog with a nice, cool Sterling Heights Comfort Dog vest, we got to figure that part out. But we're going to get this program up and running. And not to mention all that, but also people that are victims of crimes, children that have to show up in the detective bureau and give testimony or being interviewed. To have that dog in the room can be a great comfort. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Is there any wonder why we have the best police department in the state and the country? But we also have the best fire department, and as I mentioned earlier, the budget provides funding in core areas necessary to sustain our critical firefighting and EMS services. The fire chief, in collaboration with his leadership team, city council, and administration, is doing all that is possible to address the impact of the never-ending increase in EMS runs, due in large part to our aging society. The new lift assist ordinance will be helpful. Advanced hiring personnel instead of waiting for vacancies will also be another helpful solution. Priority dispatch will be another potential solution. And cost-effective deployment of very expensive equipment will be another. Fire Chief Edmonds will now talk about how these initiatives will be impacting the fire department and the proposed budget.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Good evening, Mayor Taylor, council members, Mr. Koszybski. I'm honored here tonight to present to you an overview of the 2023-24 proposed budget of the fire department. One of the things that I really want to highlight is our strategic planning process that we're currently underway. To be responsive to the community, the fire department needs to be efficient and effective. That is the right size resources related to the workload present to respond, mitigate, and prevent emergencies due to fire, medical, and hazardous materials and other dangers in our community. To do this effectively requires a plan to guide the organization through the years ahead. So we've included these funds for a consultant to lead us through this strategic planning process, and it's going to be data-driven. One of the phases that we've already done with this strategic planning process is phase 1. So the consultants were on site during the month of March. After receiving a data analysis from us, we gave them a bunch of data in January and February. And then when they were on site for the 2 days, they briefly went over their analysis of the data. They're still working on that as they go forward. They met with the following groups to understand the fire department and the issues that we're currently facing in each division. They met with the training staff, the Fire Prevention Bureau, the administration, the Extinguishment Bureau. They also conducted interviews with city management, council members, to get a real good understanding of what needs to be done in the future. Phase 2 is going to be an on-site visit. This will be a 2-day visit that they'll come back and do. The first day will be presentations of the findings of the report and some education along with the members that are participating in day number 2. The second day is an 8-hour planning meeting where a SWOT analysis will be reviewed along with the mission, visions, and values. The majority of time spent on the second day will be develop goals and objectives and how we measure these goals and objectives going forward. And then also built into the process is going to be a way of yearly reviewing our goals and objectives that we had initiated for that year to see if we're striving and meeting those benchmarks. I'd like to talk about our new hiring process that we've worked with the city administration. This is going to greatly help us with recruiting because a lot of the times that we're doing these hiring processes in the past were 2 to 3 times a year, and it took a lot of work and effort on our part, city administration, and human resources to be able to undertake these. So what we're doing now is we're in January, meeting with the city, determining our need in the future of future retirements. We're going to go out in February and do recruiting, testing, and applications all in that 1 month. And then in March, we're doing interviews and establishing a hiring list. And then May and April are background checks with an orientation date of June is what we're striving for. This new process aligns with the fire academies that are being ran out there at the community college and also the ending in one of the paramedic schools. So we're going to be going into these places right when they're ready to look for work to kind of get them hooked for Sterling Heights. All right, now I'd like to talk about some of the improvements that we've made with the help of past budgets. So Station 1 was improved for replacements in the last year, and I'd like to show you some before and after pictures of that, and it's with the cooperation between the Fire Department Administration, the workforce, and City Council to allow us to be able to do this. So some of the things, Station 1 was old and tired. There was a lot of wallpaper there that was coming off. There was a little bit of what appeared to be mold. We did have it tested. It wasn't, and it was all mitigated before we redid it. Here's some other pictures of workrooms that were, you could see just the age of the building was taking place here. And here's the new refreshed look afterwards. What you see on the left is our new training center that we have there at Station 1. And then the new report room, you can see that it's nice, bright, and all cleaned up. And then other areas is we have a new office workroom for the battalion chiefs that are now located at Station 1, and then some kitchens. So there was a lot of work that was done. There's still work that needs to be done on the outside. Within this current budget, there's a replacement cost for the parking lot. It will be done in a couple phases because it's a large project. The next station needs assessment that we need to do is Station 5. Station 5 is about 30-plus years old. and it's in need of some tender loving care. So what this budget assessment will be is that we're asking for funds to do a needs assessment to look at the crew side and the administration and a planned improvement going forward. There was HVAC replacement in this current budget. It will be going out to bid and installed later this year. So here's some of the current pictures of Station 5. Yes, in our capital improvement, we do have for a new stove because that door is kind of falling off. So we're going to incorporate the new stove into the new look. We do have storage issues. In the locker room, there was carpet that was installed in the 90s that probably needs to remove and is not good for athletic places to have that. And then the carpet's showing wear. This is the crew quarter size. And then on the administration side, again, in our locker room, we have carpeting that was installed. We have cubicles from the 90s, and we have storage issues. And all these will be looked at in this needs assessment and creating a plan going forward. The new ambulance program. This is a picture of the new ambulance that we'll be taking delivery of later this month. Right now, it's at a trade show at the Chiefs Conference, so we're getting our brand out there statewide. Earlier today, I did speak at the Chief Conference about some initiatives that we're undertaking that we talked about in the strategic plan with the ground emergency medical transport. So our ambulance fleet with this new vehicle, which is a pickup truck chassis, will give us a durability of an extra 30 to 50,000 miles before these need to be replaced. Now the EMS system, we began transport in 2017, and I believe we're providing the best service for our residents. As the calls are increasing for both private and government-based services, our industry needs to look at things like priority dispatching, low acuity EMS vehicles, and that may be in the form of a basic life support ambulance, and specifically EMS prevention. So what we've done to this date so far is the cost recovery ordinance that I brought to you earlier in the year, and you supported it. We're going through those phases. We talked with all the elderly facilities, and we're working through all the kinks at this point in time. We're also looking at to hire another consultant or to see if Dynamex can do this for us too, to look at priority EMS dispatching. What we need to be able to do is kind of load our calls as to the criticality of our calls. And you can see up there in that square, there's A, C, B, and D, and it has to do with ALS and the level of response. In the bottom corner, you'll see an E, and that's an echo response, which is an extremely life-threatening situation. Deltas, and that would be a cardiac arrest, multiple trauma situation from a person that's trapped in a car. D would be a life-threatening emergency of someone who's undergoing a heart attack or somebody who's having extreme difficulty breathing. So it allows us with this priority dispatching to provide the right resources at the right time in the right amount to handle the issue. One of the other things that I'd really like to highlight for us as an organization, and this couldn't be done without the help of my command staff, is the FEMA grants. And recently, we've got FEMA grants, going back to 2018. We had $120,000 for physicals. 19, we did get the SAFER grant for $1.7 million. In 2019, we got another $120,000 for health and physicals. In 2020, we got $146,000. And in this last year, we received $507,000. Two of the programs that we're going to be initiating this year is that we've already undertaken the peer support training for our members. We've got 15 people that are trained up through the IFF. We did this through a web-based program, and they received the training. The other thing that will be taking place is the peer fitness. The peer fitness will happen in October. Again, we'll have members, and 90% of these costs are paid for by this federal grant with backfill and actually the cost of the class. And this allows our members to have a good mental and physical health. Part of this grant also included, besides health and wellness, cancer prevention in the form of exhaust captures for all the vehicles. We also were able to acquire a fit tester and then a power loader for our ambulance. So the removal of the diesel fuel or diesel fumes in the fire station is really important to prevent cancer in the fire service. And then with that, we'll be able to replace the old Niederman system that was in certain bays. And when we added the ambulance service, we did not put exhaust capture in that bay. So this grant will allow us to exhaust capture every vehicle that we have in the fire station going forward, and will reduce our cancer exposures. Some of the things I'd like to highlight, and Michigan undertook some of these things a year ago, was initial education requirements imposed on us from the state. Officers now have to have Officer 1 and Officer 2, depending on whether they're a lieutenant or a captain, inspectors training, and then incident management training. So you can see a lieutenant, after they become a firefighter, and then when they move into the officer role, they have to take an instructor class and Officer 1, and that adds up to about 92 hours. And then captains have to take an Officer 2 class, which is another 40 hours of training. Now, with all that training, we have to do continuing education on a regular basis. So here's some monthly requirements that we have to fulfill. Firefighter paramedics have to fulfill about 19 hours a month. That's fire and EMS education. Officers, because it includes both firefighter paramedic education, because many of them are still have to maintain their fire certification and paramedic, are at 23 hours, and inspectors are at 22 hours a month. One of the things that I would really like to highlight is the ProCare prevention plan that we're going to try to implement with the passing of this budget. This will allow preventive maintenance on this equipment that you see in front of us, the LifePack batteries, the Lucas device. So right now, we currently have a service that we provide maintenance on these things, but as they come in and do the quality checks on them once a year, if there's a repair needed, we have to then go out and purchase that repair. With this program, we'll be able to, at the time that they're doing this preventive maintenance, if the printer on the LifePack is bad, they'll replace it then and there. If one of these devices gets broke, they will give us a loaner while they're getting ours fixed, and ours will be fixed in 24 to 72 hours with this program. I used it in the past. It's very productive for us as an organization. It also allows, when the batteries fail, they'll provide us with batteries for those units. So we won't have to go out and purchase them. That's all rolled up in this preventive plan. And the last part of it is cardiac monitors. This was a multi-year project started in 2021. We had to purchase 6 monitors because they were reaching their end of service life. We've done 2 of them, and then we're requesting 2 in this budget, and then we'll just have to do 2 more with that going forward. Some of the continuing projects is education, our staff for promotions. We've had significant turnover since I became here as the fire chief. We've got a new training chief. We have a new fire marshal and a new assistant chief. Recruitment of firefighters, that's extremely important, and I think with that new hiring process as we go forward, that'll really help us. Staff and command leadership is essential. We've got some people enrolled in that program right now. We're upping our certification or CPR efforts for the public to do more classes, and then the completion and implementation of this strategic plan, which will be the first plan in the fire department's history. That concludes my presentation.
And Mayor, just in conclusion, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our leadership team, everyone in the audience before you this evening. They have spent months working on the proposed budget. I think you can get a sense for their passion and dedication, and not only their jobs, but working hand in hand with our finance team to put together a budget that's meaningful, financially responsible, and continues a course of excellence in the city. So with all of that, we're happy to address any questions that the council may have, and certainly the audience as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. Then we will move on to the next item on our agenda tonight, which is to introduce the fiscal year 2023-2024 appropriations ordinance. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Okay, then, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarco.
resolved to introduce the fiscal year 2023-24 appropriations ordinance as presented. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Council, any discussion, Mrs. Zarco?
I can start it off, but I do have a question, and I'll go through what I have here, and I know because I went first, I get another turn if I want it. And that would be to ask for an amendment to the budget, but I'll talk to Mr. Koszybski about that later. Okay, first of all, thank you all for this great presentation. It really was spectacular. I mean, once again, you've done an awesome job. I know this isn't easy, and even the presentation alone, I think it's sometimes nerve-wracking for everybody to come up and speak before us, but it's really okay.
More nerve-wracking than the dress rehearsal in front of Mr. Vanderpool.
I think they probably get away with more in front of us than they do Mr. Vanderpool. Just saying what my observation might be. But yes. But I guess I'm going to, I guess as the questions were coming in my head as the presentations were going on, I will address most of them to Ms. Varney because she probably knows the answers. Okay? There was a transfer from the Parks and Rec, into Parks and Rec, I believe, for employees. And I just wanted to know if that was coming out of the Recreating Recreation Fund. So through the chair to Mrs. Varney.
Mrs. Varney.
So the Parks and Recreation Fund is made up of two parts. So all of the Recreating Recreation millage goes into the Parks and Recreation Fund, and that covers debt service on the $45 million bond of about $3 million, as well as operations that are directly related to recreating recreation. But then in addition to that, we have to transfer monies from the general fund to cover what I always call the pre-existing Parks and Rec stuff. So again, we had a Parks and Rec department before recreating recreation. So the Parks and Rec Fund is made up of two pieces that we track separately, the recreating recreation expenses and the pre-existing Parks and Rec expenses. So it's made up of two sources of revenue, basically.
Okay, thank you. We always talk about the employee to resident ratio, and I really don't think we should be bragging about it anymore. I think that we are negligent and that we need to do something about it, and we need to bump up those employees because they're needed here. So I don't think it's anything we should be bragging about. Just my thought as we were going through the presentations. Okay, let's go to the flyby for the Tuskegee Airmen. I just want to know if that's going to be partially sponsorship funded, or if that's, I noticed that there was something about it in the budget, but I just want to know how much of that is going to be sponsorship.
Sorry.
You can just continue to answer. Duration.
We have $4,000 in the budget, and off the top of my head, I can't recall how much is coming from the Lamparters.
I can elaborate if
Thank you.
Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor.
You have to wait for me, though.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Zarko, it is being entirely funded through two organizations. One is DC3S, which is funding half the costs, and that'd be Ron and Mary Lamparter, and BAE is funding the balance.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. We talked about the turnover rate. And we are losing some good people to other communities. And I guess when we do these exit interviews, I would wonder what is attracting some of our really longtime employees to go somewhere else. So that would be something I'd like to see us concentrate more on. Does that account for the greater part of the turnover? Or is it because they wanted a full-time position and they only had a part-time position? So that would be something I really would like to do some more research on, as far as why people are leaving. Paid internships, are the internships paid internships or college credit internships?
They're paid in internships.
Okay. The deadline for the refuge collection, for the bids, do we know off the top of your head when the deadline is for submission?
The bid has not went out yet, but I believe we're planning on hoping to have something to council in June.
The threshold for purchasing, going from 10,000 to 50,000. I understand the reason for raising it, but when I looked at the comparable communities, some of them are only like in the 25 to 30,000. So I'd like that to be a consideration if we have to, increase it, maybe not as much as the 50,000. The new patrol units that the police department's using for, for the streets, I have to say, we had an experience, probably within 6 weeks ago, that I had to call the chief for something that happened at a church. So, and they were there, were very responsive, took care of the problem immediately. So at firsthand experience, I know that it works. So the other thing is, do we have a type of dog in mind for this comfort dog? Is he around already and we just don't know about him? So I guess through the chair to the chief, do we have this dog already?
Chief. We do not have the dog. We've had a lot of suggestions, and I have my own personal preference. I want something that doesn't shed, hyperallergenic, and medium size. So I don't want a small basket dog. Some people wanted dogs that go in baskets. I don't want that. So that's all I can tell you right now. So
Will we have a naming contest maybe so that the
could.
residents
Yes,
could get
social
involved
media,
in this? I think that'd be
100%.
great PR.
yes, yes.
Okay, all right, that's it. And then for Chief Edmund, we said that firefighter hiring is based on expected personnel losses. So that means that sometimes we have unexpected personnel losses. So we aren't, that isn't in the recruiting process. We're just kind of counting on the numbers as far as how many we think will be retiring, correct?
That is correct, and if I can elaborate a little bit, so right now, we've put out 5 offers with this last hiring list. We had 1 replacement that we had to do, so we're ahead right now of 4 with the expected retirements in September and December.
Okay. And another question is, do we provide the continuing education internally for our firefighters?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, I think that's all the comments that I have right now. So if I wanted to ask for an amendment to the budget, do I do that now or do I do it later?
Mr. Koszybski?
So tonight, council, if you have suggested amendments, you would make those suggested amendments tonight, and then Jennifer Varney would go back and look at what those costs would be, and we'd bring back a formal motion for an amendment on the 25th at the next budget hearing.
Okay, so can I do it now?
Sure can.
Perfect. Okay. Within the last month, the Michigan Municipal League actually paid for my trip to the National League of Cities. And back in, I think, 2003, because we had discontinued out-of-state travel for our directors, we followed suit with doing the same thing for city council. And that meant that you couldn't go to National League of Cities. For 20 years, we haven't paid any dues there, and the dues alone, I estimate that we've saved $200,000 over 20 years. Because it's roughly now 10,000, it's 10.7, I think, according to our population. But when we received direct federal funding, it was because of the lobbying of the Michigan Municipal League, other state leagues throughout the country, and also the National League of Cities. So in return for what they did, we got over $18 million, which is a significant return on an investment of, I would say, joining the league and having a budget in there for travel expenses not to exceed $35,000 for the year. I think that the reasons that we stated in the past, like at strategic planning, is that we were too large maybe to participate still just in the Michigan League, wouldn't be accurate. We are a big fish in a small pond here in the Michigan Municipal League. I mean, they look up to us because of what we do here and because we're the 4th largest city in the state. But meeting in DC with all these other cities throughout, and towns and villages throughout the country, we're a mid-sized city. So it's not like, I'm sure that we're going to learn from other cities, but in the same respect, they're going to learn from us. So that's something that I can see to be a benefit for us in the future. So I can see now why this is a benefit for us to consider rejoining the league after all these years and participating in the lobbying that they do for us on a regular basis. So all these years, we've been benefiting from all of the lobbying that they've done, whether in Washington, and we haven't paid any dues. So does that sound familiar? So that's all I have to say, and if I think of anything else, I will ask for a second turn.
Okay, was that the motion? Do you need a
Yes,
second?
that's a motion.
You got all that down? That's the motion.
Need a motion.
So we don't need a motion, you just need to make a recommendation?
Recommendation,
and then-
yes.
I mean, do we need, with
This
any
will,
objection to the amendment offered by Mrs. Zarco?
Because we wouldn't vote on it
No, we
until
don't vote on it
next
anyways.
time.
It's coming at the next meeting.
Exactly.
yes.
So,
But, and then you could say, it's not just expenses for council, it would be for city council and administration, because there are a lot of appointed officials that are also at this conference.
well, look, I can tell you from my experience with the U.S. Conference of Mayors that you have the opportunity to meet with mayors and council members and administrators from cities between 100,000 and 200,000 in population. There are many, many of them throughout the country. And in the context of municipalities, there's really no competitiveness that I can tell. There's just, the residents of Sterling, or the city of Sterling Heights is not competing for the same residents as somewhere like, Stockton, California. So you can learn a lot about what they're doing there. You can take what's good there and bring it back here and vice versa. So I've found my membership in the U.S. Conference of Mayors for the last 5 years to be very beneficial to me and hopefully to the city as well. So I think it's a great idea.
I have to add, though, is we broke into our groups, because there's rooms for small cities, rooms for medium cities, rooms for large cities, and then you sit around and you have these roundtable discussions. So I'm in this, needless to say, I wasn't first at the table that day to speak, just to let you know, because there were too many other people that wanted to be first. So there were probably 8 or 10 of us there, and they were going around the table and they were saying, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And so it was my turn. All of a sudden, after I said, well, we're doing this and we have this going on, and the residents, and I kept on saying, it's the residents. The residents, they make it easy for us to run a city because they know what kind of city they want to live in. They wanted to know how we got our millages passed. That was one of the questions, not one, but 2. Parks and Rec was a big deal as far as what they wanted in their communities as well. So all of a sudden, they were asking me all the questions because they were learning from me, and it just took like a half an hour, 45-minute conversation. So it was interesting to see the dynamics. But yes, so I think it's a good thing.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Zarco. Council, anyone else?
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt.
Thanks. Well, actually, I'll take up where Mrs. Zarco left off. As far as the National League of Cities, I think sometimes when we're at MML, I don't feel like I can relate to a lot of the other communities that are there, because most of the communities that are there are much smaller than we are. So you're right. We are the ones they look to a lot of times in the room as to what we're doing in our community. Warren, some of the other larger communities don't participate with the MML conference, and I'm not sure why, but that's their business. I just know that I think being in groups of communities that are like-sized will be very informational and helpful for me. So thank you for bringing that forward. I'm going to jump all over the place, and I apologize ahead of time. So, well, Mrs. Varney, since you're there, we talked about the new social worker, which I'm very excited. They are very needed in our community. So that position is being funded with the opioid settlement. So there's $100,000 in the budget to fund it. Are we anticipating on the city getting $100,000 per year for that 18 years? How is that funding coming to us?
So we're getting 2.6 million over 18 years, which I believe comes out to 300,000 or 400,000 a year. We actually have already received nearly 600,000 that's sitting in the bank. So we got the first payments on the settlement. There were two different organizations, I guess, that are paying money. One of them went ahead and paid 5 years of their settlement at one time, and the other one we got two years worth. So we have that money, sitting in the bank. So, 2.6 million divided by 18 is, how much we expect to get annually, but we have some more than that already.
So we should be set to fund that for many, many years then.
I mean, we have the cash now to fund that for
Right.
5 or 6 years.
And I can't thank Ms. Compton enough for everything she has done for our community. It's amazing, and to think that we were probably one of the first cities in Michigan to get one. And we knew when we created that position, I think at the last budget, we all talked about one's not going to be nearly enough, and here we are, with our second one, and I would anticipate that there could be more. So I'm really pleased with this addition. And Ms. Compton, I can't say enough for everything that she has accomplished. Whenever I've reached out to her on behalf of residents, she is right there front and center and willing to jump in both feet. So I appreciate that, and I think it's really important asset to our community and our residents. I'm trying to think. As for the purchasing threshold from 10,000 to 50,000, I am not comfortable increasing it to 50,000. The 7 of us up here answer to the taxpayers of the city and how we spend their money. And I may agree to a slight increase, but I think 50,000 is too big of a bite for me personally to be comfortable with. And I understand the rationale behind it, but I think at the end of the day, we are accountable to the voters of the city. So that's my 2 cents on that. Through the chair to Ms. Davis, since you're out there, I have just a quick question. I noticed the PEG fees that we're collecting, or the cable fees that we're collecting, and I'm wondering I know WOW is really pushing customers, i.e. myself, to go to streaming and to drop my cable, how we anticipate that's going to affect any revenue that we get from the cable companies.
Well, if they do push people to streaming, obviously, we have seen significant drops in the amount of revenue that we're getting quarter over quarter from all of the cable companies. So, yeah, we would definitely need to consider that moving forward and see how it impacts our overall budget.
I had a conversation just last week with WOW when my bill went up almost $50 in 1 month. And they said, well, you should go to streaming because this is what it'll bring your bill down to. And so it just kind of was, what's going to happen with that? So
We'll have to be monitoring that because we have noticed that money, that revenue is dropping quarter over quarter.
yeah. Okay. And as far as the 4-day work week, I want to stress that I think it's a great idea. And also, we have not reduced any city services by doing this. In fact, we've increased the hours at City Hall from when we cut back. So I appreciate administration really coming up with creative ways to get that done without having to close City Hall for a day a week or, reducing services. So I appreciate that. And I guess I don't know who I'm going to ask this. So regarding the internships, where are we recruiting? Are we recruiting at the colleges?
So we do have an external recruitment that's actively posted on our website right now. The last time I had checked, we had, I think, a roughly 130 candidates apply, or intern candidates apply. So the outreach in terms of recruitment, it goes to a diversity job board, but we also post to something called Handshake. So Handshake, if you're not familiar with it, it's a sort of hub for universities, colleges, where active students and alumni, Handshake is their platform to use when they're advertising opportunities, job opportunities. So our internship is also posted through Handshake as well.
Okay, great. Through the chair to Chief Wojciechowski, just for my third budget in a row, I'm going to plead that we put some pressure to get school resource officers, more school resource officers in our high schools. We have 2 high schools in the city that are not covered by a designated school resource officer. We have middle schools that they have probably more issues most days than the high schools do. So I'm putting pressure on you to stay on top of them. They've received funding for safety, increased safety funding through the state and through the federal government, and the money's there. So I think they have, you know, and I really think the communication between the school district and the police department, you know, if an incident happens at a school not in our city, in Warren, we have Warren Consolidated Schools, has 2 high schools in Warren, 3 high schools in Sterling Heights. We have 1 resource officer in Sterling Heights. The 2 high schools in Warren have their own designated resource officer. However, my big pet peeve is if something happens at one of the Warren high schools, if there is a situation, a threat, our department isn't necessarily informed that there was an issue in one of their high schools. When we have students from those 2 feeder schools in Warren coming into Sterling Heights to go to the Career Prep Center.
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually just met with Dr. Livernoy about having more ongoing security and safety meetings, which we are. In fact, we're meeting this week, myself and representative from the Warren Police Department with the superintendent directly and their head of security, which is going to start a lot of great conversations about ways to make everybody safer. And I will definitely pass along those concerns because I have the same concerns.
Yeah, I just think that communication, since we have students coming from those schools in Warren, needs to be open to Sterling Heights, because if there is enhanced enforcement one day at Mater Cosno because of a threat, a potential threat, then we need to have some more enforcement at Career Prep Center, because we are getting those Mott and Cosno students in our school as well. So they are in our community, and, you know, both Warren Con and Utica schools just a few weeks ago were put into a real lockdown. And it was very stressful and very tense in the buildings when that happened. Today we had lockdown drills. You know, it really makes me sad that we have to do this, but it's because of when we need to do it for real, the kids know what to do. And trust me, the kids know what to do. They're ready. So I'm going to fight for that until we get it. Another one, at least one more. So they help pay for that position, and we're kind of at their mercy to get it. But if they agree to it, I would certainly hope that this council finds the money somewhere, and Ms. Varney finds the money somewhere to fund the rest of it, because it's very important, very, very important with all that's going on in the world. And kudos to that direct patrol. Those are amazing numbers, and the Phantom Group and badges, building bridges. Oh my gosh, from personal experience, we have had foster children in our family, and a couple have just been adopted into our family last month. It's traumatizing to hear what a lot of these kids go through, and to know that our police officers are willing to reach out and be involved with them is really an amazing job, and kudos to all of them. I can't say enough. It only will help our community to have them involved in children's lives that don't have the best situations going on. So, and I think, Chief, that's all for you. And then Chief Edmond, just a couple of things. So the continuing education that you talked about, is it taking place during shift, or is it off shift time that they would have to come in and do the training?
What we try to do is provide on-duty training, and then there's also video training that takes some of that.
Okay, good. And as far as the strategic plan, that the study, when do you anticipate the next phase?
The next phase, we anticipate the week of May 8th, and I'll be meeting with the assistant city manager to kind of get some of the stuff internally rolling that we need to.
Okay, and then you talked about the hiring process where you start in January, and can we wait till January? Are we good to wait that long? I mean, is that going to be your annual, this is the way it's going to be, or?
When we had discussions about how to do this up front, we felt that was the best time of the year to do it, just because the release of the students from schools, a lot of the paramedic programs will start in August, and they kind of end up in June and July, so we grab those paramedics. And then the Fire Academy has 2 sessions, one in the fall and one in the spring, so we're grabbing one of those sessions. So we had a lot of discussions about when to start that process, and we thought this was the best way to do it to capture the students that were leaving school that were looking for employment.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, that was a good time frame for you folks. And I think that is, okay, through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool. We talked about Maple Lane, Moravian, 16 Mile between Ryan and DeQuinder, Ryan and Mound, what's being improved?
Councilwoman Schmidt, can you clarify specifically what section of road?
So the redoing of Moravian, the redoing of Maple Lane between Volpe and 14, they're in this budget. However, when is that work planned to be done? This summer or next summer?
Gotcha. So Maple Lane will be done this construction season. We'll have that schedule very soon. We're out to bid on a number of those projects, so we'll have the schedule finalized, but it will be done before January, hopefully on the front end. With respect to Moravian, while that's budgeted in the proposed budget, that actually will not be done until next construction season. So before July of 2024 would be the objective.
And then what about 16 Mile? When are they planning on finishing?
16 Mile will start this year. That will be the last section. Actually, there's 2 sections of Metro Parkway that will be done this year. So the section between Mound and Ryan will be one of the first ones up, as will Shaner, north between Canal and M59. That'll be done spring, summer. And then there's another section of Metro Parkway which will follow yet this construction season, and that will be east of Dodge Park Road, so toward Shaner. That's the last section of Metro Parkway that really hasn't been addressed, including a lot of those roads leading in and out of Metro Parkway. In that section, the aprons need to be redone and so on. So after this year, Metro Parkway is going to be in really good shape, as will Ryan Road. Shaner Road's going to be in great shape. 14 Mile Road, we're going to have significant work done this construction year on 14 Mile Road. Maple Lane's going to get a micro resurfacing this summer. So you're going to see a lot of road construction on major roads, including Pondview, We have another major section on Pondview north of 19 Mile Road that's going to be done yet this construction season, not to mention all the neighborhood roads. So we have, we're spending $1 million more neighborhood roads this summer as well. So once we have all that finalized in the next month, we're going to be sending out that construction schedule with specific dates and water billing on social media, on our website. And we're also giving residents the opportunity to scan a QR code. If they're impacted by that road construction, they can get regular updates via email and text messages.
And then as far as Moravian waiting until next year, some of my concern is when, I know it's a county road and we're at their mercy, it's in really rough shape. And I anticipate they're just going to asphalt it, right? It's not going to be a cement redo, correct?
I'll have to confirm that. I think it will be a significant joint repair, a major concrete repair, and then an asphalt overlay. Now, that's not ideal. That's a problem in Michigan. You're seeing a lot of road work, but these roads should be completely reconstructed like Mound Road. Instead, it's kind of a Band-Aid. You get 10 or 15 years out of what's being done, but it's better than nothing. So I'll confirm that with you. We pushed really hard to have Moravian moved into this construction season. We're very worried about it going through another winter.
Mm-hmm.
We met with our county commissioners. We've pleaded with the county road department to move it into this year. And we even offered to help advance construct it and finance it in terms of advanced constructing. But unfortunately, we just weren't able to get there. So anything the council can do, if you want to call the county commissioners or the county road department to, see what can be done to maybe advance it, but I think they're going to say there's nothing they can do. That's got to happen next year.
Well, I've had those conversations, including with the county executive. So one of my concerns is it being a smaller road and not cement. I live off of Moravian, so I can tell you firsthand that there are a lot of 18-wheeled trucks that travel Moravian. And I think if they put a weight limit or don't allow those big trucks on Moravian, it will certainly help extend the life of that road. Because there's a lot of trucks, particular fruit market trucks, that are there multiple times a day, up and down, and other very large delivery trucks. So I think maybe putting weight limits, and who's going to enforce it, but it may help something. So other than that, I think I am all set. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Council, anyone else? Mrs. Koski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Number of comments. NLC. When I was first elected, council attended, and we were members of National League of Cities. I was the one that I think caused us to resign from NLC because I was very, very active with NLC. I was a member of the Public Safety Steering Committee. I was president of Women in Municipal Government. And at that time, we had a council watchdog that came to council and commented on the amount of money that I was spending in traveling and that shouldn't be allowed. And I think I was, at that point, the only one that participated. So it was decided to eliminate our membership with National League of Cities. But I can tell you that what I learned over the years, the friendships that I made, the information that I brought back from the people that I met with National League of Cities, MML is no comparison. So I would strongly recommend that the city rejoin National League of Cities, because this council will learn so much by attending those conferences, and especially if they participate in the different programs. And I know that some of our directors used to attend also. So I think it would be a mistake not to do it. And I hope there's no council watchdogs out there to come in and complain, because the city is what it is today because what we learned there. And if it comes down to the hard point, I'd say drop out of MML to do it. But that's just my opinion. In regard to increasing the purchasing limit to 50,000, I'm not in favor of that. It's 10,000 right now. I can maybe go with 20,000, but I certainly would not go for an ordinance to allow it to be adjusted to the cost of living every year. If we're going to increase the purchasing limit, I would say maximum 20,000, because we do have a duty to the residents. And I think to take it up to 50,000 is way too much. In regard to our police department, chief, you're doing a fantastic job, all the different programs that you're providing for our residents. It lets them know what you do for the community. I do have one request, and that is at some of our elementary schools, we have an issue with parents coming to pick up their children, especially after COVID. It seemed like nobody wants their child to ride the bus anymore. So the parents all come. Well, the parking lot is not that big to handle all of that. And you have mom and dad showing up 45 minutes early to get a parking spot, or they're parking in the no parking fire lane zone. Some getting very angry because they're double parked, and it gets a little tense, shall we say. In the school that I am aware of is Harwood Elementary. The principal there even comes out to try to direct traffic and move them through. So I would greatly appreciate, and I know a number of parents would greatly appreciate, if you could come up with any kind of idea to resolve that problem or lessen it before somebody gets hurt, especially when the children are trying to cross to get to their parents' cars, and people are getting a little angry because it's double parked there and they want to leave and can't. So, any comment?
Yes, so I can have Lieutenant Allen reach directly out to the principal, see what we can do. We'll get officers out there to figure out what the problem is, queuing them up better. The problem is, as you know, the principals and teachers becoming traffic cops in a parking lot, and it's chaos. And so it's not just Harwood, it's multiple schools that call us on a weekly basis. Can you please send some officers down here? These parents are out of control. They're rude. There was almost an accident. They're illegally parking. They're blocking driveways. And we have to go out there and we address the issue. But I will absolutely put Harwood on the list, and we'll have our traffic bureau go down there and talk directly to her.
Greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Why don't they take the bus? So easy.
I don't know. They quit taking the bus. All that.
I don't understand.
And now
I've seen
my
it too.
child is not going to ride the bus anymore because of COVID. So, Fire Chief Edmonds, you're doing a great job. I love the continuing education program, and I love the idea that we're doing it in-house. The equipment maintenance program, I think that's a great idea. One question for you. Are we on a maintenance, or I should say a program for replacement for ambulances and our fire trucks?
We
Can
do
you tell us a little more about that?
We do have an ambulance replacement. I worked with city administration, and we've come up with a plan going forward that, like that pickup truck that we showed, there'll be one in every budget coming forward to replace that. Part of the strategic plan will look at the fire apparatus replacement. So that's a plan that still needs to be developed.
So that we don't get caught with a 300-year-old fire truck and no replacement coming out because it takes about 6 months to get it, or a year?
It actually takes longer than that. It's taken up to 3 years now.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, so we had purchased one last year, and it has not been built yet.
Okay, what's our oldest fire truck now?
It's approaching, it's a little over 20 years, and that's a reserve apparatus. All the frontline fleet is under 15 years.
Okay, because I remember I did a ride-along once and got into the vehicle and it didn't start. And I sure don't want to get to that point again. So anything you need, please bring it to council and let us know and get our advanced order in for the 3-year waiting period. Doing a great job, thank you.
Thank you.
I know in the capital project, we are doing some replacement or some work on some of the paths in our parks. I don't know who can answer this question, if I should direct it to Mr. Vanderpool. When are we going to take care of the parking lot at Donovan Park?
Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Koski. Well, first of all, I think Parks and Rec is the next budget hearing, so our Parks and Rec director will be there. He can give more specific information. But I do know that, we're still trying to work on securing some funding for acquisition to expand that parking lot. It's still on our radar screen. We have had recent conversations with the church leadership there, trying to get to a point where we can bring something back for city council's consideration. So it is on our radar screen and we're trying to get it done.
I thought we were almost there.
Well, now we're even a little closer to almost there.
One last comment. I would like to trade the DEI manager for a social worker. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Koski. I want to just get one item of clarification, Mr. Vanderpool. So we've had a couple council members talk about the presentation regarding increasing the bid threshold. So the bid threshold right now, is that $10,000?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay. And we talked about this a couple years ago about not changing the bid threshold, but changing the amount that the council is required to vote on. And that was turned down at the time. This is different, right? This is increasing the bid threshold so that we can get companies to provide pricing for items that we might need, that they would otherwise not provide if they have to go through a formal bid process. But this is not giving administration, or nothing is really even proposed yet, but it wouldn't give administration the ability to spend money up to that bid threshold. It would just give city administration the ability to go solicit, what do you want, quotes?
Yeah.
Instead of bids, and then those would come back to the city council, and anything over $10,000 would still have to be voted on.
By the city council, yes. Mayor, if you don't mind, if I could just elaborate a little further, and I apologize if we were not crystal clear on this. This is much different than what was proposed a few years ago to city council. And this is in direct response to the market conditions that we're currently encountering. So we're simply requesting an increase in the bid threshold of $50,000, which is equivalent to what the founding fathers approved in 1968. It's simply adjusted to inflation and addresses the market problems we're having right now. So the current process is really not the most prudent course for our taxpayers. They're not getting the most competitive bids and prices because of the very low threshold. So increasing it to 50,000, we believe will get us more bids, more competitive pricing, and more favorable results for taxpayers than the current very low $10,000 threshold. And you're correct, Mayor. Anything over $10,000 will still have to come to City Council for approval. So City Council will still be able to validate whether or not you feel this is good competitive pricing before you vote yes or no on it. So it is much different than what was proposed a few years ago.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. I just wanted, I don't know if that makes a difference to any of the council members who spoke, but I think it does, because I kind of sensed it was, the conversation was heading back to where we were, when was that, 3, 4, 5 years ago? So, okay. Council, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was a wonderful presentation. I was very impressed by a couple things, but I had just a few questions. To start, I guess I will talk about the purchasing threshold. I'm comfortable with raising the limit for bidding. I don't know if 50 grand is the right amount. That seems somewhat high to me, but even $35,000, I think that would be acceptable. I'm also in favor of raising the cap on what we pay for to $20,000. Because I think right now we're starting to get these little contracts that are starting to clog our agendas for yoga and for different things. Because now with inflation, the cost has exceeded even what I think we would really vote on. We're voting on chair yoga lessons now. So I would be comfortable with raising the threshold to $20,000 for our approval, which would require, I believe, a charter amendment. So I am in favor of that. And I appreciate you, Mr. Mayor, for saying that, because I'll be honest, I was confused by what was presented tonight. I don't think it was very clear, so I appreciate that. I guess through the chair to the police chief, I am in favor of this comfort dog. I think it would be a real boon to the department. I was so pleased to see that the jail closure has gone so well, and that the directed patrol is patrolling neighborhoods and keeping the promises we made to residents. In reading through the material that we have here, it said that we might have to retire our police canines. So I was hoping you might be able to expand on that a little bit for me.
Well, as you know, marijuana was made legal in the state of Michigan. All dogs, every canine was trained to sense and smell marijuana. So we know that now a dog can indicate on a car, could indicate on cocaine, heroin, marijuana, but it could be legal marijuana in the car. And that becomes very controversial about whether or not that stop was predicated with a marijuana smell or cocaine smell. Right now, Macomb County, the prosecutor's office has not said you can't use a marijuana dog, but we know that it's probably going to happen. Oakland County has already made decisions like that. The prosecutor said don't use a marijuana-trained dog as a reason to get into someone's car, because that might be a false hit or a hit on legal marijuana. We're not there with Macomb County yet, and we're actively working to replace all of our dogs with dogs that no longer detect marijuana. In fact, 2 of the dogs, soon to be 3, have training dogs with them, and our dogs are going to be retired, and the new dogs that are no longer trained for marijuana will be up and running. So we're very aware of this, and we're working as quickly as possible to make that transition happen.
I appreciate that. I know that this was a concern when they legalized marijuana, and we were going to have to transition. To the dogs that are being replaced, I assume they go home with their owners, they live a happy life.
100%, yes, yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Okay, that's all I have for you, Chief. Chief Edmonds, if I could talk with you just briefly. I was hoping you could tell me more about priority EMS dispatching, because in the past we've talked about ambulance-only calls or different ways to send out our apparatus to try to save money and miles. Hoping you could talk about that briefly for me.
Yes, so priority dispatch, right now at a Comtech, we have 2 types of calls that get originated for EMS, life-threatening or non-life-threatening. As I presented that chart to you, there's more than just 2 that are there. So the dispatchers, they are all trained in emergency medical dispatching right now, so they have those job skills. What's lacking is the containers to put people in as they call in for emergencies, to ask them certain questions that would put them into that A, B, C, D, or E category, or even what we refer to as the Omega, you can wait an hour or 2 for an ambulance. I'm currently working with Comtech to try to use the system that they have in place, which is PowerPhone. There's other better systems that would work with New World, which is what they use to be able to provide a better service to the residents. So right now, my game plan is to work collaboratively with other EMS fire-based agencies that are out of Comtech to get this priority dispatch. I've already had a few preliminary conversations with ComTech about this, and we're in the preliminary phases of it.
Excellent. I also want to talk about the response vehicles, the echo vehicles. And it's in the budget, but it hasn't really been talked about yet. So I was hoping you could give us any information you have about, I mean, we're being asked to pay for $500,000 worth of vehicles. And I haven't seen how we're going to deploy them or why we're going to deploy them or anything like that. Could you address that for me?
What we really need to do in this next year is really study this collaboratively with the union and with some consultants to figure out what best method to deploy our resources and where would one work, would additional ambulance work, that really needs to be vetted out to figure out what's best for it. So it may pay for an additional ambulance, it may pay for an alternative vehicle. We have to vet that out as we go forward.
I guess my curiosity is, and I fully support this. I think it's a great idea. But I'm wondering if it's almost not ripe to be put in the budget yet, where we're allocating $500,000 to a project that I don't even know if it's ready to be off the ground or if it will be ready to be off the ground in 6 months from now. So I'm wondering, why are we putting it in so early, I guess? And maybe it's a question to Mr. Vanderpool instead, because we're putting down a place marker for $500,000, which could go into any other activities.
Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Radke, it's a good question. We've had a lot of discussion on this internally. And first and foremost, as part of the budget, and this is in the budget, is a deployment needs analysis. So we've already talked to 2 consultants that do this sort of analysis across the country. We're not the only ones who are burning out very expensive fire equipment. We're taking $600,000 fire engines and a $1.2 million ladder truck every single day. Every single day. It goes out on medical runs. So is that the most effective use of taxpayer dollars in those situations? So this deployment analysis will then help determine the mix of alternative type vehicles to deploy. And so we expect that will take 60, 90 days to get through that deployment analysis. We'll hit the ground running with that. As I mentioned, we've already talked to consultants with the chief. Of course, the chief's got to bring on his leadership team. The operative word that the chief mentioned is collaboration. And we want to make sure we're working hand in hand with those who live and breathe this issue in the fire department. But this is critically important for us because there's millions of dollars at stake. So once the deployment study is complete, we want to be able to move forward with a bidding process and implementing the plan as quickly as possible. And we anticipate that will be this fiscal year. And so, it might be tweaked some. Instead of 5 vehicles, maybe it's 3 vehicles, as the chief mentioned, maybe it's 4 vehicles. Hard to say at this point, but we'd rather have the budget allocation. City Council is still going to have to approve whatever mix it is after we go through any sort of bidding process, but our goal is to have that fully implemented this fiscal year.
And I guess to the chief, we have facilities to house these vehicles. They're not going to be sitting in driveways. I know we have so many engine bays and things like that. We have spare room for these vehicles?
That'll be in part of that deployment analysis to make sure that we can put them under roof because we don't want them sitting outside.
And then I guess my final thing I talk about the fire department for every year I've been here is diversity and the hiring process. And I'll be honest, I'm awfully frustrated because this is my 6th year on council. I've talked about this for 6 years straight. I actually think that the fire department is less diverse today than it was when I first was elected. I know you're doing everything you can, but I'm going to have to ask and hold you to the fire. We need a more diverse fire department that reflects the community that it serves. And it's unacceptable to me that it's been 6 years and it seems to be stuck in neutral. We're right back where we started. The city is embarking on this diversity, equity, inclusion journey to try to facilitate this. But I need the fire department to step up. So I'm going to ask you to go back to your leadership and really emphasize that. To the NLC, I fully support Councilwoman Zarco's motion. I've been making that motion for 5 years now, so I really do appreciate that people have come around and understand that. I'd love to talk with peer communities, like the mayor said, communities of over 100,000 who have some of the same similar problems that we do. Because I know that often in MML, we get asked a lot of questions, but often it's about minutia because other communities don't have the size or resources that we do. I guess one final thing I'll talk about, looking at all this, is through the chair of the police chief, but I'm not going to, you don't have to answer anything. Essentially, we had a pedestrian accident on 15 Mile Road in a marked crosswalk. I know that your team is doing everything they can, but I do think there needs to be an emphasis on pedestrian safety in the city. And whether that's having the directed patrol go out and watch crosswalks. I mean, you could do it right across from City Hall here. I watch cars power through them crosswalks every other day, not just on Thursdays when we have music in the park. And, the law says that if someone is in a marked crosswalk, you must yield to them. And I see it get blew by every time. And not just here. Go to 18.5 Mile and Van Dyke. I watch people try to cross that giant traffic circle and almost get mauled. 18 Mile and Van Dyke going from the bus stop to the east side where there's businesses. I watch people there. We had a city council event there that we were afraid to go into the crosswalk because cars don't yield. It's your department, their job is really enforce the law. We need to go out there and make sure that our pedestrians are being safe, because when I watch a video of a gentleman cartwheeling through the air because someone blew through a crosswalk and struck him, it haunts me, because we put these safety improvements in to protect people. He was doing everything he was supposed to do, and obviously drivers don't care. I fully support the DE&I manager. I've been supportive of this for a long time. I'm glad to see it in the budget. I'm also glad to see $175,000 for reworking our master plan. It's long overdue. I would say it needs to follow a form plan to try to really figure out different ways that property can be used. People have property rights. They need to have a freedom to build. And we should take a more hands-off approach to how property is handled in the city. That's all I have right now, Mr. Mayor, but I might remember something else, so I might have to come back again.
That would be fine. Thank you, Mr. Radke. Council, anyone else? Mr. Yanes?
Sure, I'll go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some comments, and then I guess that the most controversial thing that we're going to talk about is comfort dogs and memberships to the National League of Cities. We're doing pretty good. It was just a couple years ago when Mrs. Schmidt told city management to get out their erasers and sharpen their pencils. That was very tense. And now we're not.
I remember that.
We're not quite, so do I. First thing, so one of my first comments is, and this is just my frustration, but, after spending all the time and money to upgrade our streetlights to LEDs, we get a 15%, we're paying $200,000 because DTE has a 15% rate hike. And at some point, I know the citizens are frustrated, I'm frustrated. We have that premium rate coming to us this summer, so when we're all flipping on our air conditioners, we're gonna pay even more. Whether it's through Michigan Municipal League or NLC or whatever, we really need to get a control on the money that we're spending for our, for electrical utilities. This is outrageous. And this is a publicly traded company, so they're doing it for one reason, to make a profit, and they're making a profit off of our citizens. So, let me see. So we cleared up the purchasing thing. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I do support giving the purchasing department the tools that they need to save the city as much money as possible. The internship program, I think, is a great idea, and I'm glad to hear that they're going to be paid, and I fully support the internship program. PD directed patrols, yeah, you did. You guys came through. It was well worth the money, well worth the effort. I'm sorry that they're so busy. I wish they weren't, but I'm glad they're out there, and I feel that the city is safer because of it. So thank you, men and women, for that, Chief. Through the chair to Ms. Varney. Oh, there you are.
I'm here.
Sorry. I know, here we go. Now we're going to get into the controversial stuff. I know that we said that we're not raising taxes. Well, we never said that. We said we were not raising the millage rate, correct? But we are, your property tax did go up. So there is a tax increase. It's the regular tax increase that we pay every year. You know, our contracts go up, our costs go up. That's sort of mitigated by the increase in property tax. But there is, and people who pay property tax are paying an increase, right? Do we know what the number is, the average for the homeowner as opposed to the business? What the average is?
Yeah, so again,
Oh, through the chair, I'm sorry, through the chair.
She's got carte
Free
blanche.
reign, totally free reign.
So yeah, the average person that's, lived in their home, didn't move this year, is gonna see a 5% increase in their taxable value. I don't know, the slide I had showed, so the average, home this year, the taxable value is about 92,000, that's about 6,300 taxable value more than last year. And the average taxes on that home was about $1,500, compared to about $1,400 last year. So just based on taxable value going up, the average homeowner, will see about, $100 a year, $8 a month increase. Now, the 5% is, so normally we always get inflation, but there's a cap. 5% is the cap. This is the first time in, I think that we've hit the cap, probably not ever, but a very long time. Actual inflation, for that same period was 7.9%. So yes, taxable value is going up. It's going up less than inflation, but no millage increase.
Right. We just don't want to say that there is no tax increase. There's no millage increase. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure the folks out there are getting the right picture. Fire chief, you want to come up? I promise to be kind. I promise to be kind. I just, and I think the city manager sort of cleared this up, but I just want to make sure that we're crystal clear. In Mrs. Varney's presentation, we talked about the 5 quick response vehicles or SUVs or whatever they are. In your presentation, you didn't say anything about the 5, but you did mention a BLS rig. We're just waiting to find out what this survey or,
Strategic plan.
I'm sorry,
Strategic plan?
not a strategic plan, but a study. We're having a study done, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We're going to look at a deployment study that's going to help us assess those needs and to assess what we need to do.
Okay. And Chief, my colleague here asked you what the oldest rig was, and you said it was over 20 years old. Our oldest rig is 98, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And I know that because I was on the crew that broke that rig in. So it's a 24-year-old truck. And we also have the 99, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's a 23-year-old truck.
Yes, and those both are reserve apparatus.
They're both, well, how often are they in service?
I would have to get the exact numbers from our maintenance system because they will go in frontline service if one of the frontline vehicles need to go down for repairs or maintenance.
And we keep logs, so we know what vehicles are in service every day, right?
Yes, and I would have to get you that information. I do not know it off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
so I would say, just my guess, on a fairly regular basis, we're putting a 23-year-old fire truck in service as a frontline pumper. Whatever,
Occasionally, yes.
Occasionally. Well, maybe you can get me that data and you can let me know last year how often the 98 and the 99 were in service. I'll ask you for that data, okay?
And I will provide that data to you.
Thank you, I appreciate that, sir. In our, when we got our budget stuff, there were things that were, everything that was asked for and what was included and what wasn't included. I noticed that there was a request for money for the generator at Station 4. Is there a problem with that generator? I know we're not funding it, but I'm just wondering why you don't know. If you don't know, that's fine. Go ahead.
So I did contact the facilities director with that question. So the generator that was requested was a 2008 model, but the facilities director at the time and the current facilities director both agreed that it could wait one more year to be replaced. And then I also had some information. Fire Station 3 has a 2-year-old generator, number 1 has a 6-year-old generator, and 2 and 5 are older models but have no issues. So that was the information I received from the interim facilities
Okay,
director.
thank you. And those are all diesel generators, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Ms. Varney. Chief, I noticed that when they gave us this awesome book here. It's huge and got a lot of information in it. And when I was going through the fire department section, I noticed both in fire extinguishment and fire prevention, they talked about the education of commercial businesses, industrial community, as well as the education of residents in fire safety practices, therefore to reduce the residential fire incidents and ultimately eliminating fatal and large loss residential fires. And I guess we can add commercial too. We had Buff Whalen a couple of years ago. Fortunately, no lives were lost. What are the education programs that we're providing?
As we get requests, we'll go out and provide those education requirements with the fire prevention staff and at times the training division staff.
Do we solicit them or do they solicit us?
They solicit us.
Are we doing a juvenile fire setter program?
We have members that are trained, and when we have a juvenile fire setter that we need to mentor, we get them into the system.
And what about going into the schools? We just do that once a year during Fire Safety Week, or?
That is correct.
So we used to have the automated fire plug to do fire safety programs. Are we doing that anymore?
Right now, we are not.
We are not. Okay. So we're really not, we're not being proactive when it comes to providing fire safety. People have to come to us and ask for that, correct?
That would be a correct statement right now. And with the strategic plan, that could be one of the initiative as we go forward and how to improve that educational process.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Going back to the apparatus, when you took over as fire chief, was there an apparatus replacement plan in place?
There was a replacement plan for the ambulances that we've had adjusted.
But not the fire trucks?
Not that I could find, no.
I find that interesting because when I worked there many years ago, we actually ran out of vehicles. The grass rig was ladder one for a while. And we were scrambling to keep 5 engines in service. And I thought that the chief at the time had put together a plan. So I'm a little surprised to hear that. And I'm, quite surprised that we're using 22, 23-year-old vehicles, even if they are backup vehicles. They still are frontline vehicles on an occasional basis. And one other thing, Chief, at one point we talked about a cadet program. Have we talked about that recently, or is that dead?
No, it is not dead. It still is in the ember stages, I would say.
Good term for a firefighter, yes, sir, ember stages. So what are the plans for that? Or what's your thought process in moving forward with the cadet program?
We would like to do it. It's getting all the systems in place, and right now, with the workload of the strategic planning going forward, I feel that that's a priority for the organization right now.
Okay. That's all I got for you, Chief.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're quite welcome. You got off light. So, a couple of things. I'll start with the easy one first. And this will be a budget amendment. I'd like to see $25,000 added to the budget to for a proposed environmental study for the purpose of reducing the cost of lawn care and our carbon footprint. I did have a chance to have a conversation last year with some folks from our engineering firm, and they felt that they could do one for $15,000 or $20,000. I think it's incredibly important that we do this. As we know, one of my big issues here is that we're spending $1 million a year on lawn care. We need to get a handle on, first of all, the cost of cutting grass, but we also need to get a handle on our carbon footprint and the cost of that. And anyways, I'm putting that, I'm asking for that to be added to the budget. Do I have to make a motion, or is that's just, okay? And then, so I know that a couple people brought up the DEI officer. Through the chair to Mr. Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool, the DEI officer is slated to become a director's position, reporting directly to you.
Mr. Vanderpool.
No.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Yanez, that's correct. The DEI officer would be placed in city management. All directors report to me. We have different tiers of directors. We have 3 tiers of directors. This particular position would be equivalent to, well, first of all, it's important the position be a leadership position, but it would be in the supervisory group per se. So it would be in tier 3 of directors, if you will. And we feel that's appropriate with a new position of this sort. We'll monitor and gauge it in future years to see if there's a recommendation for it to be adjusted at all. But I think that's a prudent course for a new position like this. But, you can see, well, I'm happy to elaborate on the justification for the position, but I don't think that's what you asked.
No, I'm highly supportive of a DEI person, our DEI program, highly supportive. But here's the thing. Well, let me ask you this again, Mr. Vanderpool. If this wasn't a director's position, they were working under another director, what would the title be? What would be the level of pay? Yeah, what would their title be? What would we call them?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, we didn't contemplate it being in a specific department. The need is global. The need is throughout the organization. Every department has the need to collaborate with this position. Every department has the ongoing need for training to ensure that we are an inclusive organization, and we are, but to continue to improve that, to make sure that our current diverse workforce, and our workforce is becoming more and more diverse, continues to feel inclusive and a part of the larger organization, and to make sure that as we recruit new talent too, that image is projected externally as well. So this is an all-encompassing position that's working hand in hand with every director and manager and supervisor in the organization. And that's why it really needs to be in this leadership level.
Well, I get that. But here's the thing. We have an HR director. This is really an HR position. And we have a social worker that handled 274 cases. The police chief listed everything that she's done. She's done a director's work, and she's getting paid social worker rate. 274 cases, so I just did quick math using 5 business days times 52, 260 days in a year, and she took on 274 cases. Plus all the other work that she's doing. She is a director who's working, no offense, chief, under a police officer. And when we first talked about this a couple years ago, I brought up that I felt that the social worker should report directly to the city manager. This is an important position that a lot of the departments are going to use, which we've shown that even though she works under a police a lieutenant. FD uses her, and all these other positions use her within the city. So her position is global. And we're going to hire a second social worker. So I feel very strongly that our social worker should be moved into a director's position and have the new social worker work underneath her so she can continue to develop programs, and the DE&I officer work under the HR director. I just don't see having an HR director and a DEI officer that's basically a director's level position doing HR work in effect. So, I mean, that has nothing to do with the budget. There's, no amendment I can make in that. But I would ask for support from my colleagues to consider this. And when we come back in 2 weeks, direct administration to move the social worker into a director's position and put the DEI officer under the HR director. And having said that, I guess that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Oh, so,
I have not spoken yet.
I know,
Okay.
I know.
I was,
I got a
want to
running
make sure
list.
you were slow in your roll.
I got a running list.
Okay.
And
Just make
I
it.
know who's up.
Just-
But I do want some clarification from Mr. Yanez, I guess. So, I mean, it sounds to me like what you are asking for would require probably a budget amendment in terms of the pay for both positions, one up, one down, a reworking of
Org chart.
the organizational chart as well. So I guess, without commenting on the merits of what he's saying, in terms of just what kind of an amendment do you need, Mr. Koszybski or Mr. Vanderpool, in order to accomplish what Mr. Yanez is asking for?
Well, we would need to, Mayor, we'd need to study exactly, when we say the social worker should be a director level position, we'd need to review, what level that should be. Obviously, that's not being recommended by either the HR director or the HR manager. And, then we'd have to look at downgrading the DE&I position, which neither is that recommended by the HR director or HR manager. So we did spend months and months looking at the organizational design of this. So we'd have to come back with you and try to figure out organizationally, what level should it be at? Because I'm not sure you have, you probably don't know what level you would want the social worker in as a director. So, we'd probably be scrambling around to figure out, in short order where that should be, when really it should require a pretty exhaustive analysis it certainly could be upgraded, the social worker, and that's probably something we'd be recommending in short order, but we'd be scrambling to justify what level of directorship it should be at.
Do you want something changed for 2 weeks from today? Do you want something to vote on?
I do,
Yanez?
well,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, so I just thought it was just, financially, it was just going to be a swap on pay. If we have to have some sort of motion that will, eliminate the position and create a new position under HR, or?
What union is Amy in?
I'll ask Kate to comment on some of these details.
Amy is within the MAPE Professional and Technical Group.
So she'd have to leave that, go to supervisory. I mean, we don't have directors in MAPE technical,
Correct.
right? Look, let me just cut to the chase. I'm against this. I think it's not the job of the city council to be telling the city management how to do its job. I think we have very clear roles, clearly defined roles. And if the policy of the city council is that we need to give more responsibility and we need to give more duties to the social worker, and we need to give less responsibility to the DEI. I mean, I still even think that is probably not the proper role of the city council, but at least we could say something like, based on the need out there, we need more work pushed towards the social worker, and then the city administration and city management, it's their job to manage the city and manage the day-to-day operations. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to be telling the CEO of the company how to hire and where to put them. I'm actually quite comfortable with the organizational chart as it's presented. So I would say I would be against it. And I guess rather than, do we want to have this discussion now, or do we want to just wait 2 weeks? Do you even have enough direction, Mr. Vanderpool, to prepare something to be voted on?
Mayor, I'm not sure it's clear. I mean, I have to call on the HR director too. There's labor negotiations required here. There's a whole host of organizational issues that, to redesign this on the fly could create some collective bargaining agreement issues and so on. We really need some time to thoroughly review the request to upgrade the social worker.
Okay, let's let council weigh in.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry.
Hold on, Mr. Radke, real quick. Yes, Mr.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond, although I cut you off, I'm sorry. I should let you finish what you were going to say.
No, I'm done with what I was
Okay.
saying. I mean, at this point, you and I can go back and forth and back and
We
forth.
can.
But I think it's more important to say, well, let's find out where the city council is at. And if there are 4 people up here who say we need to rewrite the org chart and we need to rework these positions, and I think we're opening a can of worms, but we should find out. If you're the only one who wants this, then it doesn't need to go much farther than it's already gone.
Yeah,
right? And if you do have 5, 6 council members, and if I'm all alone, then that's worth finding out as well.
Yeah, so let me just say, the board of directors directs what goes on in a corporation. The chair, unless the chair is the major stockholder, doesn't tell the board what to do. The board tells the chair what to do. So that's number one. Number two, I'm trying to be polite here, but a couple years ago, let me say this. A couple years ago, when we talked about hiring the social worker, and I said the social worker should be a director's position. And you know what I heard? Oh my goodness, I don't know how we're going to do that. We'll have to create a position for her. She'll have to be a director. It was this huge thing about how are we going to get this done? And so we hire a social worker, put her under a police lieutenant, and now we're going to hire a DEI officer. No problem. Director, got her own position, no problem. I sense some hypocrisy there. And now I'm getting really upset about this. Amy has proven that she has the value, we have the need, and for her to continue to work in this capacity, I think is really a slap in her face. And I have no idea what a DEI officer does, what the qualifications are, what the educational background is. I know it's important. I've seen the work done. I've attended the meetings and the trainings. I think it's a very important thing to do. I just don't know why it has to be a director's position. And we're creating this one when we couldn't create one for the social worker a couple years ago. And now, again, we have to scale this mountain to figure out, how are we going to move her out of the union into a director's position? It's hypocritical. I'm not happy with this. At this point, I'm ready to eliminate the DEI position, and then we can just contract with somebody, and it doesn't have to be an employee. I'm not going to make that motion. I might wait for 2 weeks, but that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, just briefly before I open it up. With all due respect, Mr. Yanez, I think you're comparing apples and oranges. I mean, no disrespect to Amy Compton. She is a phenomenal employee, and she's doing incredible work. And so I don't, but we have 531 city employees budgeted, and I could go to a person and say, you are doing great work. for the city. I mean, every employee I talk to, every employee I see interacting with our public, every employee that I have a meeting with, they're all doing great work. They almost to a person are all highly motivated, good employees. They can't all be directors. And that's just not how the organization works. Ms. Compton's role is to primarily, she works within the organization, but she is a outward facing, primarily, working with members of the public, working with our police department to provide those services to the public. Whereas my understanding of the DEI officer is that it's not just going to be a role working with the public, although I do think that that's important, but primarily, as I understand, working within our organization. So the problem is, if we say, you know, we're going to make this employee a subordinate of Kate's, then, I mean, no disrespect again to Kate or to Jeff, but if you're going to the police chief and you're going to the fire chief and the library director and the Parks and Recreation director, and you're going to firefighters, and you're going to police officers, and you're going to library employees, and you're going to DPW employees, and you're telling them, this is what's being implemented, this is how we're going to do things, this is the training that you're going to go through, but this person is at a lower level than those other employees, I'm just not sure it's going to carry the same weight. This is, again, the way it's been set up by the administration. I trust them. I think they're doing a good job. Let's have a discussion about it right now. Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You actually said a lot of what I was about to say.
Liz, you're going to get your turn. We are talking about his proposed amendment. So everybody, all seven of us will talk about his proposed amendment. Then when Mr. Yanez is done with his time, you will have as much time as you possibly need on the actual budget. Go ahead, Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, rank in the organization matters. It's hard to carry out change in an organization if the person you're trying to dictate change to is a higher rank than you. It's hard I think it would be hard for a D&I manager to go to the chief of police or go to the fire chief, and they're a level below them, but say, I want you to do this. And if they don't want to do it, they're going to call her boss, and they're going to talk directly to people of the same rank. It's why we have a military. We have multiple one-star generals, for example, because you have to have rank to carry out what you want to do. I am comfortable with the org chart as it is. I also find it very distressing that we're talking about promoting a person rather than a job. If we are going to create a director of social work, which I don't know what that person would do, I don't want to say that this person is automatically going to become the director. I think that honestly, and this is crazy, I'm going to support Mr. Vanderpool here. I think that's Mr. Vanderpool's job. He picks his directors. And the idea that we're going to reach down and promote someone because they're doing a good job, she's doing a tremendous job, I think that's wrong. And I honestly think that she is right where she needs to be in the organization right now. So I wouldn't support downgrading the DE&I officer, and I wouldn't support creating a director-level position of social work. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Anyone else want to discuss this rearrangement of the organizational chart? Mrs. Koski.
Mr. Mayor, don't you remember when we had to cut back our Parks and Rec manager was no longer a director. He was a director, or she was a director. And we changed the position to be a manager, and that was okay. Yet they had the whole department, the Parks and Rec department. They were a leader, they were a director, but not in name. So I don't buy the idea that you have to have the title to do your job.
Is the Parks and Rec director going to every other department and implementing policies that they have to follow? I don't think it's a fair
Point of order,
comparison
Mr.
at all.
Mayor. Let Mrs. Koski speak.
She's directing her questions to her comments to me. You can go and finish.
No, I don't think I need to. I think I made my point. If the Parks and Rec department only directed a certain little item there, he was in charge of the grounds, and that was more than just the activities. Their responsibility was quite large, because as soon as we were able, we made the Parks and Rec manager a director again. Why did we do that? Because that's what the position required, and that's what our charter called for. Now, our charter doesn't address a DEI position, and I don't see, if we can't come to some agreement now, put the DEI in HR and just hire another social worker. And when you can, then make the social worker a director. That's all.
Anyone else?
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. Mr. Vanderpool, we had a conversation about this very subject last week, and I would like to see it be a manager or a supervisor position, and if it needs to be a director, we can change it later on. And as far as, being a lower rank and going to other departments, they're not a lower rank within that department. They're part of the organization. They're part of the human resource department. And they could be going into any department as a facilitator in that department. And at that point, they don't have rank in that department, so it doesn't really matter if they're a manager or a director. And as far as the social work position, I think in the near future negotiations, maybe we need to reconsider that pay scale of that position. And if it comes to upgrading to a supervisory or a director social worker, that's a different discussion. Yes, as busy as whoever would be in that position is, they probably most definitely deserve an upgrade in that pay scale. And we knew that going in. But as far as the DEI officer, I am more comfortable having them as part of HR because they are going to be working with every department, which HR works with every department. And if we need to upgrade that into a director, then we do it later on. But we don't even know what that job is going to entail right now, which is exactly what we said about the social work position when we created the social work position. We didn't know what it really entailed until they got into that position. So that's my 2 cents.
Anyone else?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Sarowski?
And yes, I will keep this germane to the question. So for the DEI director position, I am also not in favor of this being a director. I work in a different organization, but we do have DEI going forward in our organization. This has been, and even when I left Beaumont, a very large organization, it was HR. It's still HR where I am today. We still implement. And the HR person who promotes and provides the information, the education, and the implementation of the administration's policies is not a director. But they are implementing those policies as directed by the level of a person who would be the CEO of the company. So that person who is implementing and teaching and training each department does not have to be a director in order to teach and train each department. When we have active shooter training, does that have to be, do we need an active shooter director? Because that's going to go to every department. Do we need to have a building safety? Do we need to have, CPR training and have a CPR director? That's the logic that you're using when you say that this person goes to each department implementing policy and instructing and would have to instruct a director, so they would have to be at a director level to instruct another director. That doesn't make sense. You can implement policy from any level if you're implementing the policy asked for and expected by the CEO and you can be a manager. You can be a supervisor, do not have to be a director. So, I'm making sure everyone's listening. So I am not in favor of this being a director. I feel that that is not an appropriate level to start at for a new position, and I will not be in favor. We discussed this in our discussion, and I believe that there have been others. So I am going to say I'm not in favor of this. I am not going to be at the next budget meeting, so I'm going to ask that we find a way for me to be involved. I am going to be out so I can give proxy votes, or I can be involved with being a remote attendee. But I will make sure I'm here if we're going to be voting on this. So that's my next request. So, and that's all I have to say about DE&I.
Mrs. Arco.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Through the chair to Chief Dwojciechowski. Is the social worker considered one of your civilian employees?
Yes, it would be, yes.
So she would be eligible for Civilian Employee of the Year?
That is true, yes.
Okay. So then if we have another social worker in that department, they'll still be civilian employees within the police department, correct?
It'd be, yeah, eligible, non-sworn, yes.
Okay, that's all, maybe you want to consider nominating her for Civilian Employee of the Year next year. Okay, first of all, I'm in favor of the DEI position, not the title. I would prefer it was a manager's position to start out with, and actually, I know there is a difference in that position answering directly to Mr. Vanderpool or directly to Mr. Bohorsky. But I just feel that it has so much to do with human resources that to start with, I believe that it should be in that department and under, it would be, the person would be under Mr. Bohorsky. Just to start out, give it a year's trial to see how this works. Find out, we don't even know who's going to apply for this job. And we're making a big deal out of it for the title, but I would be comfortable, instead of having a new director, we have an additional manager. It's not the position I'm opposed to, it's the title. Yep, that's it.
What is the title of this position, Mr. Vanderpool?
Mayor, the title is DE&I officer, not director.
Okay.
And
Okay, so it's DE&I officer. So are we saying nobody here is comfortable with the title DEI officer?
But,
I'm
okay,
curious.
well, it's not, but if the DEI officer is equivalent to being a director, yeah, then I guess I would.
The DEI officer is going to be in the supervisory union, not in the SHEG, not in the executive union. It would be in the supervisory union, which I understand a number of other managers are in the supervisory union. There are some directors in the supervisory union, but there are also managers in the supervisory union. We have a city charter that says that the city manager is the administrative head of the city. The city manager shall be the administrative agent of the council and shall be vested with all administrative powers of the city. Administrative powers include hiring, firing, the organizational chart, where these employees are going to work, who they're going to report to. It shall be the duty of the city manager to supervise and coordinate the work of the administrative officers and the departments of the city. That's his role. That's not our role. I'm sorry, it's just not our role to be telling, we have Kate, we have Jeff, we have Mark. They're all saying, we want to hire a DEI officer that will report to the city manager. Mr. Bohorsky, do you mind coming up here and the city council wants to put this position directly under your authority, having this person report to you. Who do you report to?
Mark.
Yeah, Mark. So, right? So it's moving deck chairs. I don't understand it. I really don't. I haven't heard a compelling reason why we would go against the manager that we've hired to manage the city. I haven't heard that the pay scale that's being proposed in this budget needs to be reduced for the DEI officer. All I've really heard is we can't call this person a director. Well, we're not. What is your take on this, Mr. Bohorsky? Do you think that this employee should report directly to you or directly to Mr. Vanderpool, and why?
Like most discussions where, you know, there's a little element of truth to what everybody said tonight, so I just want to say that up front. There's pieces that are right.
Man who loves his job.
Former city attorney.
He's been with us for a while.
So there is an element to, all the pieces are on the table, but you have to construct that into a puzzle that fits, right? And that's where I think I struggle a little bit. I've heard wonderful things about Miss Compton. She's been, you know, a superstar for her duration of her career with us, and we're lucky to have her. I don't, but the only exception I would say is, you know, we have traditionally, Mayor, when, and it works both ways. Sometimes we've initiated an adjustment in pay and responsibilities that kind of go hand in hand. The job description has to match the pay. And we've done that. And the union has come to us and said, this employee is fantastic, and, you know, their role has expanded. And I think it's not unusual for a new position to have somebody take that and run with it. And I think by all measures, Amy's done that. So I would, you know, we're negotiating with that group right now, so the time is appropriate. We can look at that. To elevate it, if you're asking for my candid opinion, to elevate that at this time to a director position, I think that would be problematic. Not because in the future that position might grow into it, but right now, unfortunately, to say that position as it's currently constructed carries the either the charter director positions or something that we have through the organizational plan deemed to be a director position. The job description doesn't lead to a director position at this time. So I think to say, let's make this into a director position, that would be problematic. Not only, you know, maybe from a practical standpoint, but it would set I don't want to say a bad precedent, but somewhat of a dangerous precedent to say this person is going to be elevated to a director position, you know, based on the fact that they're doing an excellent job. And now if we, as Mr. Vanderbilt said, if you studied over time and say, you know, we need to create, I'm not sure what it would be, an office of social, you know, work, then you start to get closer, Mayor. But right now, just based on the reasoning that was put forth, I think it would be problematic to elevate that to a director's. Not saying it couldn't happen in the future, but I think overall it would be a bad precedent. And again, you know, if it means increasing wages and benefits for our social workers because the role has changed, that happens all the time. They have reclassification rights. Every year, a member of that bargaining unit can come forward and say, my role has substantially changed, and it's not commensurate with the wages that I'm getting paid. So there are mechanisms currently in the bargaining unit that Amy's in to take advantage of that. I'll just give you an example. We've worked with her to get her a uniform allowance. When we created the position, we didn't know that she would need a uniform allowance. Maybe we should have, but we've corrected that through the proper channels, working it out with the union. So I hope that gives you some perspective on that one. As far as, let me transition now to the DEI officer. Again, I think we're all a little bit uncertain of where we're going with this. And number one, that will be fleshed out. I don't have a position. I have to sit down with the union and negotiate a DEI position, right? I can't just, you know, tell you right now. So there's a process to creating these positions. And by the way, any MOU, and that's how this position would be created, would come back to you. So you do have an opportunity then to look at what we're recommending and have worked out with the union. So there is a process. This isn't random. We will look at it. We will try to get it right. And council will have full ability to say, you know what, I think you guys missed it. You're low on salary, or this person should have, you remember, and you've seen every one of these MOUs. We attached a job description. You know what the expectation for this person is. So that, this isn't random. We will work through it. We will come to you, and it'll be done the right way.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bohorsky. Mr. Koszubski,
But, I'm sorry.
what authority does the city council have to direct, aside from threatening to fire Mr. Vanderpool? Aside from that, what authority does the city council have under our charter to direct what employees report, which employees report to which directors, supervisors, and managers?
Well, to answer your question, the city manager is vested with those rights by charter. So really, as the policymakers, and whether or not you want to pay for the position is the question. And then that's the policy that he would implement, and the city manager would have the ability then to set that organization structure.
Mayor, if I,
Does there, one more thing, is there anything, well, again, aside from the threat of firing Mr. Vanderpool, is there anything that would stop him from just organizing the organization the way he wants to? If he wants the DEI officer to report to him, but we say we're only going to, what's stopping him other than we just pull the funding next year and the position's gone? Is that it?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
And we could do that with every position, right? Every single position in the organization. Right? Okay. Mr. Bohorsky.
yeah, I was going to add, one element that I just want to bring up to maybe bring a point to the discussion, and that is the city manager does create an organizational plan, and that is brought to you periodically. We're a little bit late now because we've had a lot of new positions created, so it's in progress, but that plan, he's required to bring that to council, and that's your opportunity then to look at that organizational plan. And that plan, if you may recall, lists every director position, every manager position, and provides details on their job duties. So you do at that point have an opportunity to have input into the organization of this city. Certainly funding for positions, as Mr. Koszubski said, a little more direct and laser focused. But in terms of the balance of powers, I think it's important to bring that up, that Mr. Vanderpool is obligated to bring the organizational structure to you, but he brings it to you. You know what I mean? It's his job to say, here's my directors, here's my managers, here's what they do, here's who they report to. That's where that organizational chart comes from. It's not something that we randomly put together. It's part of what the founding fathers of the city said we needed to do.
Mr. Yanez?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bohorsky. I don't think the city calls them SOGs, right? That's for fire department standard operating guidelines. There has to be a description for this DEI position, right? All positions have it. Who writes those? Who writes that? What do you call that, first of all?
Job description.
Job description, okay, just,
Yep.
well,
So we write a job description which covers,
you say we, who's we?
HR, Kate.
HR, okay, all right.
Collaborate on those. And when we need to create a position such as this one, we draft that. Obviously, the union's very interested in wages, so we have to cover that also. And we sit down with the union, we say, this is the job description, these are the duties, and also a key component is qualifications, educational requirements, experience, certifications. We just go right down the list. And that would all help. I wish we would have had it done today because I think it would have helped some of the discussion, but that's the process we'll go through. Then we sit down with the union. The union looks at it and they said, yes, we would like this position to be, in this case, a supervisory group. And we slot them in with other members of that group to make sure there's equity in wages. And then they sign off, and of course, it's brought to you for approval. So again, you will have your say on this.
And, thank you. And through the chair to city attorney, So it's been made very clear that the city manager has full control over the organizational chart and who gets moved where. Who has control over the budget?
City council.
So if city council wanted to strike this DEI officer position, we could just remove it out of the budget, right? That's a yes. I didn't even go to law school.
That would be an amendment.
I do, well, yes, it would be an amendment. The other thing I just want to say, Amy Compton is the only social worker that works in the city. So it's not like I'm trying to promote Amy because she's done such a great job, which she should be promoted because she should have a director's position because she does such a great job. But she's not one of a pool of people that I'm trying to move forward. She's the only social worker. So it's not like I'm trying to promote this one person because they're great. She's the only person. That's it. We'll possibly revisit this in 2 weeks. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. I think we beat this horse to death, brought it back alive, and beat it to death again, so.
Well, I'm not, do you have clear direction, Mr. Vanderpool?
No.
Mayor, there's been no motion to remove the position. There's been some discussion to ensure that it's, there's some interest in making sure that it's not a director level, which it is not proposed to be such. So in that respect, I think the direction's very clear. We'll come back, as Mr. Bahorsky said, assuming the position is approved and funding is allocated as recommended, then we will report back to City Council with a very specific job description and the related MOU. We can elaborate further tonight. The HR manager, Kate Baldwin, would be happy to share far more details on exactly what the position is intended to do and why it's being recommended in the group we're talking about conceptually. She's happy to do that tonight, but that's council's prerogative.
Mayor Taylor?
I'm not sure she's happy to do it. She will do it.
Can I just
Mrs.
ask,
Schmidt.
through the chair, to Mr. Vanderpool? So, Mr. Vanderpool, you said that this position is slated for the third tier of director. Can you explain that?
Sure. And thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Schmidt, the reason I said that is because we do have some tiers of directorship in our supervisory group. For example, the library director, the Parks and Rec director. There's a couple others, Mr. Bahorsky.
IT.
IT director. So there are different tiers. So not all of our directors are in the SHEG group. Some are in the supervisory/manager group. So, that's where this position would likely be slated, subject to a little bit of further review by HR, but that's what is proposed right now. So in that respect, it's not the director that you and I talked about in a meeting a couple of days ago in that respect. It's more of a supervisor slash manager slash director called an officer. So, it might be good for you to hear from Ms. Baldwin, who has spent, really months. She has spearheaded our DE&I effort, but with the thought in mind that she eventually would transition out of it and the DE&I process would be handled by an officer solely dedicated to the effort.
All
Ms.
right.
Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so I do have on, if we could get the presentation on the screen here. We did prepare a couple of slides in anticipation of maybe perhaps some questions that were going to be brought up on DE&I. So I think we all know the purpose, right, of the DE&I journey that we're embarking on. And to kind of recap, I've been spearheading the DE&I journey, but alongside our DE&I Employee Council, who have been instrumental in this process. And you guys are all familiar with Darlene King as well, who's our DE&I consultant that we've been working very closely with. She we've had in-depth conversations with her on what does it mean to have a DE&I leader in the organization? What will that person do for us? And so, just to name a couple things on the slide here, implementing a DE&I strategy and DE&I within the organization into the culture creates greater opportunities for recruitment, retention, which we talked about tonight, creates an organization that reflects the community that we serve, creates an environment that fosters creativity and innovation, fresh and different perspectives, builds an inclusive and welcoming environment, all of these things here on this slide. We did go over it was a few months ago, we talked about what our DEI strategy long-term goals are, and I won't rehash those. You guys know the city management org chart. This is where the DEI officer is slated currently within the budget. And then we've done some research on what will this DE&I officer do. So we have a sampling of responsibilities. And it's important to note that this person is not only going to be internally facing, as the mayor had said, but also there's an external component too. This DE&I officer is going to see through the DE&I strategy. They will act as the official representative on DE&I initiatives to city departments, our city manager's office, elected officials, and again, the community. They're going to be an advocate for DE&I and develop strategies and shared organizational responsibilities for equity. And these are very broad scope, so obviously there's a ton of tasks that would be incorporated under each of these responsibilities. The fourth bullet point, provide leadership that grows capacity for intercultural competence, nurturance of diverse populations, and inclusive leadership. Facilitate and support the ongoing departmental training on DE&I while promoting cultural understandings and current climates on DE&I just in, throughout the nation and globally, and measure the city's progress on incorporating DE&I throughout the organization. So this role in and of itself, we imagine it to be very broad in terms of scope of responsibilities. And again, this is just a sampling. We've had a lot of in-depth discussion amongst ourselves internally. We've pulled in our DE&I consultant to get their expertise on what's needed. And this is sort of the direction that we're headed.
So I guess my question, back to these different tiers of directors. So in this third tier, is that our managers, essentially? Is that what you're saying? I mean, are the directors, in my eye, are Mike Moore, the director of DPW, the chiefs. I'm not sure who's in which tier.
Sure. So I guess, the directorship title exists primarily within the executive group. We do have directorship titles within the MAPE supervisory group. And so when Mr. Vanderpool is referencing the tiers, it's because the directorship titles, they spread through the SHEG group and also into the supervisory group. So the supervisory group is a mix. We have our city controller, we have myself, we have directorship titles, we have manager titles, so sort of a mix.
Okay.
The DE&I officer would be we don't have a officer title yet in the MAPE supervisory group, so that would be, a different title.
So they wouldn't be called the director of DEI?
No, the title for the position that we've slotted is DE&I officer, diversity, equity, and inclusion officer.
And it's not the same level as a director? It's not.
It is.
In my eyes, it's
Well,
not.
so I
According to their
guess,
policy.
yeah, and it all, I think it depends on like the scope of responsibility. So they're not going to have the directorship title, but they will report directly to Mark. Or, excuse me, Mr. Vanderpool.
And what is, why, it may be through the chair to Mr. Bohorsky, why do you feel it shouldn't be under HR, that it should be under Mr. Vanderpool?
Again, I think principally, and I don't mean to speak for Mr. Vanderpool, I think in my conversations with him, he felt that it was a position that, again, if it doesn't have the administrative responsibility and authority, it may not translate across the organization. Directors are viewed as very influential policymakers, broad span of authority, broad span of powers. And that was really, I think, the thinking that this, to be effective, this position would need those powers and authority to be effective. I just want to say, Ms. Schmidt, you didn't ask me directly, but if you just, I don't want to disagree with me. I think his choice of third tier is probably not, that kind of creates three tiers. I just want to clarify, we don't have really technically three tiers. We have directors and managers. If the consensus of council is, this is a manager level, then the title really doesn't slot into tiers. It's really just directors and managers. There's a long history that everybody's getting tired of. I don't want to get into explaining why there are directors in MAPE, but it happened back in, I think it was 1980, that a decision came from Merck that took certain positions out of supervisory, and then we formed the executive group because for a lot of reasons we were told they could not be in the supervisory group. And this happened, like I said, many, many, many years ago, pre-1990. So, but I just want to clarify that point. We don't really have tiers as such.
Okay. And it really is the duty of council to fund any position. So, Mr. Vanderpool, yes, has the right to appoint or hire whoever he wants, but we also have the right to approve funding or not. So, and I'm not against this position. I'm not saying that. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else on this?
One more thing.
Go ahead, Mr. Yannis.
Mr. Mahorsky.
Yes.
We have employee, for lack of a better term, manuals, right? In the fire department, they call them SOGs. I don't know what they call them in the police department. General orders. And those are the directives that the employees work under, right? If you break one of these, you get in trouble. You get written up. You get taken to the boss's office, whatever. We're going to have DEI policies, right? I mean, it's just not in the ether where this person goes around and says, you got to do this or that. We're going to have policies, correct? I mean, what is this person going to do if they're not directing based on policies?
Yeah, again, I think, again, we're getting a little bit ahead on discussion, but I'll do my best to answer your question. I think that the policy could be standalone. It could be incorporated into we have APPOs, for instance. So we have anti-discrimination APPOs and things like that. So it could be, this policy could manifest itself in APPOs. It could get into, depending on, again, as Kate said, pretty broad powers. It will manifest itself throughout the organization, I could see it in a variety of ways.
So the point is that if you have an employee coming around saying, we have these written policies that you have to adhere to, it doesn't matter if a director is telling you, or a manager is telling you, or what are we calling it here? Officer is telling you. You have to live by the rules, or you could be fired. Is correct?
Technically, yes. Depending on the degree of offense, yes.
You get my point. Thank you.
But can I just say one other thing?
Yes, you can.
Again, those policies already exist. I think what I envision the DEI officer is making sure that those policies are reflective of DEI principles. So I think they're going to influence our APPOs. To be honest, they may influence other, police things. I mean, that's why it needs to be broad-based.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Taylor.
Look, we're way off into left field, in my opinion. I don't hear any one of us saying we want to get rid of the position, right? Nobody has said they want to pull funding for the position. Nobody has said that we want this position to be some low-level menial employee. We want this person to have the authority to implement the goals that he or she is going to be hired to implement. So unless somebody wants to reduce the funding or remove the funding, I mean, I don't see anywhere in this budget, and maybe I missed it, I don't see anywhere in this budget where it says this person is going to be in this union, is gonna have these job descriptions, is going to have this title, and is going to report to this person. So we're all in agreement, it seems like, except for Mrs. Koski, that we want a DEI person. So why don't we move on? Why don't we just move on, and then if somebody wants to make a motion that actually impacts the appropriations ordinance, I'll open the floor to such a motion. But otherwise, Mr. Bohorsky has expressed that he's gonna have to go negotiate with the proper union. And from Mr. Yanez and Mrs. Zarko and Mrs. Schmidt and Mrs. Zarowski and Mrs. Koski, it seems pretty clear to me that you don't want this to be in the SHEG group. It was never going to be in the SHEG group, okay? There are manager-level folks and director-level folks in the supervisory group. So that seems to me, I think we can all agree that's the union that it's going to be in, right? So I appreciate the discussion we've had. I think it's very helpful to the administration so that they understand what we want out of this position. But what more is there to say?
Well, can I agree with you?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Go ahead. You've been waiting to, I know.
I agree with what you're saying, and I think we should move forward because you're right. There are enough people here that have said they're in favor of the position. We don't know what the job description is going to look like. We don't know who's going to apply for the job. And I think that would depend on experience of what's coming to us, where this position or where this person might be. So I say just leave it in the budget. We can handle the rest of it at another time.
I agree.
So I sort of agree with you.
I think that's right. Anybody else
Briefly,
disagree with that?
Briefly,
Mr. Radke.
I just want to say, I agree with what you're saying, and I don't understand why we're arguing over a title right now. I feel like, is there a problem with a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator? Either you're on board with it or you're not. If you're not, let's say it. But arguing over a title and position, it strikes me as a backdoor way to fight over the actual job. Mrs. Koski says she doesn't want it. If anyone else doesn't want it, please make yourself known. Otherwise, what are we talking about here besides what we call the damn thing? And this is crazy. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? All right,
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
I'm sorry if I said I didn't want it. I said trade it because I thought we needed another social worker. And if we have so much money for this one, so much money for this. The pay is usually determined by the title. When I had my meeting for the preliminary budget, I could have swore that it was a leadership director.
That's what it says in the
DEI
budget.
director. That's what was presented. And I didn't see anything in here that called it an officer, so I missed it. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't miss it at all. It says DEI director in the budget. It does.
Downgrading it?
My objection was, I don't think we need to pay a DEI person a director's salary when we need a social worker, additional social worker, that I feel should be a director. Now, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I've understood all along, Ms. Koski. I appreciate it.
You just kept saying, she doesn't want it, she doesn't want it. That's not what I was trying to make clear to you. So you understand what I'm saying.
I'm not going to argue.
Let's move on.
I'm not going to argue with you. You said what you said, and you're saying what you're saying now. So, look, I think I think we're in general agreement. For God's sake, I mean, He's called the manager. He makes more money than anybody else here. So, I mean, what does it matter? We want a person who can be effective at what they're supposed to do. That's it. And I think all 7 of us can agree to that we want somebody who can effectively do their job, and we'll figure out a way to get that done. Mrs. Sarowski, the floor is now yours. To discuss all matters budgetary.
Not pertaining to DEI. Okay, so we'll finally wrap this up, hopefully. So before we, on a completely different note, I want to congratulate all of our administrative departments, especially Mrs. Varney. Great work on the budget. We were even in the newspaper, with kudos to the city of Sterling Heights for how well our budget looks. So I would want to thank all of the department directors, managers, and assistants who helped you with it, because it has been a pleasure to hear how well we are doing. I did want to commend the administration about the work-life balance, being interested in promoting work-life balance. That is certainly one of the things that my employees always say that they really are looking forward to obtaining and having, so that's wonderful. A little jealous about the 4-day work week. As a healthcare provider, I cannot ever have that. I'm still getting texts from people. I had a priest fall tonight. So it's, my job is 24/7, but jealous of the 4 days, even at 1 day off would be great. So just saying, that's a lovely perk. I want to commend Chief Wojciechowski and the police department. I was a little apprehensive about the jail being closed. There were people I know that were also apprehensive about the jail being closed, who I might live with. But we are happy to see that it's going well, and that those 7 extra officers do make a wonderful difference, both to the city and to the community and to other communities, because we're keeping a lot of people safe. I do see them out and about, and the other officers driving around. That makes a wonderful difference. I do have to agree with Mrs. Schmidt. I would like to see resource officer in every single school that needs them, especially junior high. Junior high is really rough for a lot of kids. They're really struggling with many things, and I think that would be very helpful to have them in every level that we can put them in. And I am going to put in a plug for the dog. Sorry, I don't think a non-shedding dog is good, because I think a golden retriever would be the very, very best, and they shed like a son of a gun, and that's not what I would say off the record. They're the best, most loving dogs, so I'm putting in for a golden retriever. And if you get one, it can come stay at my house any day. So that's my plug for that. I do want to say a very big kudos, and I do agree that additional social workers are wonderful. Yes, I do think our social worker does, because she does touch every department. We can look at, and it isn't appropriate at this time, but at a different time, to see where she would maybe fall in the organization as opposed to just in the police department. And then, yes, Amy Compton does deserve Civilian Employee of the Year, Sterling Heights Employee of the Year. She has done wonderful things at 274 cases in a 260 work week, year week. Your day or whatever, 260 days a year that she would actually be working. That's amazing. And that doesn't mean that it's a one and done. Those cases go on throughout many days and many weeks to have to come to a conclusion and to hopefully take care of what needs to get done. So wonderful job with Amy, and looking forward to having our other social worker as well. And now to Chief Edmonds. I'm really happy to see that the fire department is doing a wonderful job. I do like the idea of alternate vehicles on non-fire runs. That does make sense. Those big trucks, I've had to call, when I was working out in the field as a nurse, had to call 911, and everybody and their brother would come with every vehicle in town, and I thought, why are they bringing a fire truck? It doesn't make sense. And so to me, it does make more sense to have, yes, we do need sometimes the people on site, but the vehicles are the issue. So I'm interested to see what the deployment study will show and how we can use those vehicles in a different way. Cost recovery, I'm very happy to see is going to be started, and we do need to continue with that at all levels. And the priority EMS, working with the county 911 dispatch, I'm hoping to see that goes through very well. So that quickly, or my things. I don't have, my questions have already been answered, so I don't have any questions. And so thank you, Mayor, for allowing me the time to speak and say my piece, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sarowski. Well worth the wait. I don't have a whole lot. I think we did have a pretty good discussion about all aspects of this today. So I want to thank all the directors, managers, supervisors, employees who are here. And we have like 134,419 residents, and 134,418 of them are at home. So, Mr. Ojada, thank you for being here tonight and watching. You will have a time to speak in a minute if you want to. And again, thank you to the administration, Ms. Varney. Great work as always putting together this budget. Coming in, I think it's going to come in at 1,000. Well, no, we got Mr. Yanez's amendment. I was going to say it's going to come in about $1,000 above on the good side of being a balanced budget. It will be a balanced budget either way, but we appreciate the work that you put into it and your team and staff as well. And look, I just got to say that you guys were pretty graceful in how you handled that. It can't be easy where you've got your like boss and then you've got your boss's boss, kind of like having this debate and then putting you two in the middle of it. It's like, who am I supposed to please here? So I appreciate the information and I appreciate the discussion. I think it's an important thing for the city, and every so often it's good to dust off the debate skills.
Mayor Taylor, yes, you always dust off your debate skills.
Not as much as before.
Oh, yeah, you're right, not as much as before, but still. I really had a positive statement that I was going to, say at the very end, because next week at MML, the big theme is, this is our moment, this is our time. Nothing can stop us, because cities now are in such a different position than we were 10 or 15 years ago. And it's how we capitalize on this moment as to what are we going to do. The perfect example is when we were laying people off, we were cutting budgets, we didn't have these discussions, and Mr. Bohorsky and I would have this, we would say, sometimes the toughest decisions were the easiest ones to make because you didn't have a choice. And obviously, we had a choice tonight, and we certainly all let everybody know that we are voicing our opinion on that choice. So I think we're in pretty good shape, and we're moving in the right direction, so let's keep it up.
I think so too. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. The motion is to introduce the appropriations ordinance. It has been supported. We have certainly had discussion on it. So without any further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda tonight is communications from citizen.
Thank you for the time tonight and making this a really accessible meeting. I understand it was intense, but hey, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Really only had two things to comment on, having listened to everything tonight. One, I really appreciate the city not utilizing unpaid internships. Those have been becoming unpaid internships are increasingly a predatory practice against young people in a lot of other municipalities, and I really appreciate Sterling Heights being at the forefront of making sure young people are compensated. Other thing I just had one minor question that came up is with regards to CPR trainings, how often do those need to be re-upped as a citizen? I've gone through them before and would love to know.
2 years. Chief, do you want to just come up? Since this is our only comment tonight.
Every 2 years. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mr. Ojada. All right, Mr. Vanderpool, anything tonight?
Thank God, no, Mayor.
Mr. Koszewski?
No, sir.
Okay, council, any reports or any new business, anything tonight? Mr. Yanez?
Yeah, so today was day one of the My Climate Conference in Detroit. Tomorrow is day two. I spent a lot of time with a number of people working on the state's plan for decarbonization. I'm happy to report we're ahead of a lot of communities on that. And I'm hoping that we can continue to move forward. So I'm I'm excited about bringing something back that I learned from the conference, and that's all, you know.
Okay.
Happy Earth Day.
Thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, I'm hoping at the next budget hearing to hear more about the Southern Park Recreation Center plan from the Parks and Recreation Director. I know they're not presenting today, but it's something I'm very invested in and want to hear about. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, anyone else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
It's been moved and supported. No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
The heater